Chapter 1250. She had been asleep for almost a day. The doctor also said that there was nothing wrong with her body, but her head had been hit. Although they couldn't find any blood clots, they couldn't rule out other hidden dangers. They could only wait for her to wake up. This sentence was the main point of the doctor's statement. Ojima carried Wei Wei Bai home. He helped her pack her things. There was a box of manuscript and some of her things. I'll put these manuscripts in the safe for you. Don't trust others so carelessly in the future. If you don't have the manuscripts, how can you prove that you wrote the songs yourself? Ojima sat on the floor and organized the sheet music that he had collected from Wei Wei Bai's rented apartment. Wei Wei Bai squatted beside him obediently. She watched as he carefully organized the songs and spoke gently to her. She looked at him curiously, then stared blankly at the song she had written. She reached out her paw to touch the paper. She realized that she couldn't pick it up. Wei Wei Bai looked annoyed. She lifted her paw and looked at it in a daze. Ojima immediately laid on the floor and faced her directly. It was as if he had matured overnight. That violent and dark feeling had disappeared, and he still had that innocent and childish face of his. He also had the unique charm of a mature man. Wei Wei Bai. Ojima's eyes seemed to be shining. Bai Weiwei raised her cat face to look at him. Her ears drooped, and her soft fur drooped down. She seemed to have become a bereaved cat. Ojima smiled and said, "It's okay. Even if you become a cat, you will still be my favorite Wei Wei Bai." His words were surprisingly serious. His affection for her had always been at 99 and had never dropped. Even if her body was in a vegetative state, she still lived in a cat's body. He didn't waver at all. He was still full of emotions. Wei Wei Bai didn't have any resistance to being a cat. She was against being such an ugly cat. Although the big-faced cat's face was no longer so obtrusive after she put on some weight, she was still not beautiful. For Wei Wei Bai, she wanted to become a Persian cat. At least she was pretty. Ojima saw that her ears were still drooping, and her amber cat eyes were full of pitiful sadness. He couldn't help but kiss her cheek. "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of you for the rest of your life." Wei Wei Bai finally looked up. Her ears perked up as she cautiously approached him. Ojima did not move, afraid that he would scare her. In the end, Wei Wei Bai rubbed her cat face against his hair. It was so soft. When the big-faced cat was him, he felt that it was an ugly cat. But Wei Wei Bai accidentally wore it inside. He looked at the cat. No matter how he looked at it, it was cute, beautiful, and unique. Ojima felt that it was time for her to mature. Otherwise, Wei Wei Bai would become a cat, and her body would become a vegetable. Who would protect him? Ojima moved Wei Wei Bai home with a set of medical equipment. He carried the cat and ran up and down to learn about nursing. He didn't bother to do what he could. Nursing a vegetable was very tiring, but Ojima felt blessed. He knew that she was just tired. When she wasn't tired anymore, she would return to the body. She would be able to return from the cat's body, and he would tell her that everything was ready. He was just waiting for her to wake up. He would kneel down and propose. Raising a cat and nursing Wei Wei Bai. Tormenting Jiang Ro and Jiang La. If Su Yehua hadn't drowned, the first person he would torture would have been him. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Transmigration system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 1251. Su Yehuan had also found out that this man had an obsessive-compulsive disorder. He especially yearned for beautiful things. Ojima was also a fan of Su Yehuan because of his angelic persona. She thought of her photo being worshipped by people every day. Ojima was silent for a long time. He felt that he was indeed not perverted enough to understand such a scary fan. Even if he was perverted, he was only perverted toward Wei Wei Bai. Unlike Su Yehuan, who saw his angelic persona crumble, she immediately became a fan of Wei Wei Bai and stopped the two of them from dating. He had actually embarked on the criminal path of imprisonment. He even caused Wei Wei Bai to be unable to return to her body. Ojima wanted to drag this pervert out and whip his corpse. Anyway, he did everything in an orderly manner. Wei Wei Bai turned into a cat and was his spiritual support. To prevent others from finding it strange, he called Wei Wei Bai a cat as Xiaohua. Many times, he would point at himself and say to Wei Wei Bai, "You can call me Big Tree." He even changed his Weibo name. He was called Big Tree. He even changed Wei Wei Bai's Weibo name to Xiaohua. Big Tree and Xiaohua. The fans all said that this nickname was too cute. Jiang La's matter started to be exposed. The man she cheated on was a singer who was no longer popular. Under Jinma's control, that man started to expose what happened back then on Weibo. He even said that Jiang La seduced him in a good posture. After eating such a big melon, everyone immediately looked up the singer's information. They found that the male singer looked similar to Jiang Ro. It was not surprising that people in the entertainment industry looked similar to each other, but it had just been exposed that Jiang Ro had cheated on him, so it was almost certain that Jiang La was his daughter. Just as everyone was guessing, Jinma directly posted on Weibo, confirming that Jiang Ro was not his sister. It was a certificate of paternity testing. There was no blood relation between him and Jiang Ro. Jiang Ro was forced to delete all her Weibo posts and disappear from everyone's sight. And because Jiang La had lost everything, she wanted to find trouble with that male singer. In the end, she was disfigured by him. After the biggest melon was eaten, only the marshmallows were left. Everyone happily stuffed dog food into the big tree and the little flower's mouth. But slowly, the fans and netizens found out. Jinma had not appeared in a long time, and Wei Wei Bai had not even updated her Weibo. As for Su Yehua's matter, after the investigation was completed, Su Yehua's expression changed drastically. The news also began to report. On the night of the news report, Jinma posted on Weibo. His hand was tightly holding onto a slender, fair hand. It was a simple photo. His Weibo was, no matter how long it takes, a lifetime is fine. I'll wait for you to wake up. Only then did the fans find out that Wei Wei Bai had become a vegetable because of this unfortunate accident. And Jinma had been waiting for her for 3 months. 3 months. It was not a long time. It was short and heavy. From then on, Jinma stopped all commercial activities and the promotion of his new album. There was also no celebration party for the album's sales. He gave all his time to his little flower. The favorability level remained at 99. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "Are you sure I want to stay in the cat's body until the strategy is complete?" The system said, "Before you go back, your soul will leave your body and return to your body in a short time before you die." Wei Wei Bai said, "How do I die in this world?" The system said, "Because your long-term death method is different from the one given by the main system. The main system is too lazy to waste time arranging your death method and just let you die." And read the at https://www.sashu.com/the and read the at https://www.sashu.com/ and read the at https://www.sashu.com and read the at https://m sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. The comma. Chapter 1252. Wei Wei Bai. Do you have to be so casual? This is too casual. Time passed slowly. In 1 year's time, there were 4 seasons. Wei Wei Bai's body lay in bed for 3 seasons. Jinma's Weibo became cat bashing. The words on his Weibo were about taking care of Wei Wei Bai. He recorded these things for Wei Wei Bai to see. He wanted to let Wei Wei Bai feel his love and the love of his fans. This way, she would not be afraid and panic. After all, she had turned into a cat and could only eat small dried fish. She must be very sad. Jinma even said carefully, "Actually, I turned into a cat before." Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Was it that great? She had turned into a cat too. Of course, there was still a reaction. Wei Wei Bai looked at him with a hint of surprise. Under Jinma's careful protection, her fur was beautiful. Although her face was still a little big, she was already very cute. That was why not just people with money could be beautiful. Cats could be beautiful too. Jinma reached out and held her face gently. At that time, you picked me up and brought me home to raise me. Wei Wei Bai stared at him. She seemed to have thought of something and looked at him with disdain. Jinma blushed. I didn't see anything. She had seen everything when she was bathing him. Wei Wei Bai sneered. What he said revealed 300 taels of silver. Ojima knew that he was not persuasive. He could only say, "So, when you turned into a cat, I brought you home to raise you. Are we a match made in heaven?" After all, he was the only one who had such a magical experience with Wei Wei Bai. Ojima felt that they were a match made in heaven. Wei Wei Bai nodded her head shamelessly. Ojima laughed, but his favorability didn't increase. Wei Wei Bai half a year had passed, and it was almost time for the strategy quest. Ojima was stuck in 99 and refused to budge. Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment before she finally lowered her bottom line. She decided to use her cat body to tempt Ojima. If a gentle strategy wasn't enough, a seductive strategy would definitely be more than enough. Hence, when Ojima was sleeping, she would stay by his side with a serious expression. Then, she forced out a seductive cat smile. Her round cat body was lying on its side, one leg over the other. Then, it used its front paw to support its body and used its other paw to gently stroke its own fur. Ojima had just finished washing Wei Wei Bai's body and was tucking her in. The bed had been remodeled and was especially large. The outermost area was where Wei Wei Bai's body was sleeping. All the medical equipment was placed beside her. The middle was where Ojima slept, and in Ojima's arms was the cat, Wei Wei Bai. After he tucked her in, he saw Wei Wei Bai's face sink. Wei Wei Bai looked like she had nothing to live for. Her paws were too weak and couldn't even maintain a seductive posture. She looked at Ojima in a daze. Ojima didn't think much of it. He carried her up, placed her in front of his chest, and kissed her cat ears. "Go to sleep, little darling." Wei Wei Bai trembled. It was so mushy, but she still closed her eyes and fell asleep. After such a long time, she had gotten used to being surrounded by his scent. A year was about to pass. System notification: you have to leave tomorrow. If she didn't succeed by tomorrow, she would have failed. With a favorability of 99, Bai Weiwei exhausted all methods. Even the most disdainful act of acting cute rushed up. But it was useless. Weiwei Bai was in despair. She hugged her cat head and said, "Don't worry about me. Let me be alone." / Chapter 1253. The system said, "Just accept your fate as a cat. Ojima likes you with breasts and buttocks, not a round cat like you." For the past year, Weiwei Bai had been fed by Ojima until she was chubby and very cute. However, Weiwei Bai refused to look in the mirror. She had never put on weight before. She hated dried fish. Weiwei Bai hugged her head and thought for a while. "There's no other way. I can only give him a big strategy before we leave tomorrow and make him give me 100%. The system asked, "What strategy?" Weiwei Bai said, "Seduce him." The system was speechless. Ojima put on some nice clothes for Weiwei Bai and planned to bring her out to get some sun. Of course, the cat had to come along too. The family of 3, neatly lined up together. He saw that the cat was still curled up and sleeping quietly. After turning into a cat, Weiwei Bai was lazy, short-tempered, and loved to sleep. Ojima smiled dotingly and went up to carry her. However, one hand gently hooked onto the corner of his shirt. Ojima froze in his steps and stopped breathing. He did not dare to turn around, afraid that he would be disappointed again. However, he heard a familiar and gentle voice. "Jinma, I'm awake." Ojima turned around and saw Weiwei Bai leaning on the bed, looking up at him with a smile. His fingers were trembling and his expression was stiff. He stared at her without letting go. She was still too thin. No matter how hard he tried, he could not make her fat again. Ojima's eyes became misty. His eyes reddened as he reached out and gently touched her pale face. Weiwei Bai moved her hands and legs. Although the system said that there were no major problems with her body after special treatment, she even had the physical strength of a normal person. However, she had not felt a human body for a long time and was still unfamiliar with it. Ojima finally confirmed that she was awake. His intense emotions surged out in an instant. Unable to control himself, he immediately reached out and hugged her tightly. "Weiwei, you're awake." He was too agitated. His mature appearance was gone, and he only felt aggrieved and uncomfortable. "I've always been afraid that you won't be able to return to your body. A cat's lifespan is too short. I'm so afraid that I'm about to have nightmares. He was not a fool. It was not a good thing for Wei Wei Bai to become a cat. This was because the lifespan of a cat was much shorter than that of a human. What was even more frightening was that the big-faced cat was actually an old cat. Its lifespan was limited. Wei Wei Bai heard the countdown timer. He was leaving in an hour. Her pale fingertips gently stroked his back and said, "Jinma, let go of me." Oh, Jinma immediately let go. "Did I hurt you?" In the next second, his eyes were softly covered by a kiss. His tears also fell onto her lips. Oh, Jinma was pushed onto the bed by her two hands with a light strength. She slowly climbed onto his body. Her long hair was still black and beautiful, and the strands fell onto his body. Oh, Jinma lay on the bed. His white neck and Adam's apple could be seen at the collar of his shirt. He suppressed his voice and said, "Wei Wei, get down." Wei Wei Bai sat on his body and casually hooked her fingers around his collar. Then she pulled open his buttons and exposed his collarbone. His Adam's apple moved a few times. His muscles started to tense up. "Wei Wei, you just woke up? You can't do this kind of thing." He could tell that she was trying to kill him. She was tormenting him like this. Moreover, he had not been relieved for a year. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. The is at https://m.sashu.com//. Chapter 1254. Oh, Jinma turned around and saw her fall softly into his arms. At first, he thought that she was just tired and fell asleep. But he suddenly realized that it was impossible for a person to be so active after sleeping for a year. Her muscles had more or less atrophied, so she couldn't be as active as she was. She suddenly woke up as if she had a final burst of lucidity. Oh, Jinma hugged her and stared blankly at the cat on the bed. The cat was dead. The system hugged Wei Wei Bai's soul and ran back. In this world, it had been a full year, and it realized that the emotional stripper was loose for a moment, so it had to use a screwdriver to fix it for a while. Fortunately, it was fixed before Wei Wei Bai's emotions ran out, or else she would have been in pain. As for Yi Yuxuan's pain, that was his problem. The system was still worried about Yi Yuxuan's emotions in the previous worlds, but now its thoughts were on Wei Wei Bai. Suddenly, the system stopped and looked up coldly. The huge golden wheel of fate was filled with golden powder. The needle in the middle of the wheel of fate was placed steadily at the position it wanted. But a terrifying force from an unknown source started to slowly change the needle's position. Although the position was not obvious, it was enough to make the system scared. It hurriedly extended its bone-white fingertips and gently moved the change position back to its original position. With it here, no one should be deluded enough to think that they could tamper with Bai Weiwei's fate. However, when the system's hand touched the pointer of destiny, an extremely cold voice rang out, shattering the system's actions. "Found it." After this voice, a golden ribbon suddenly appeared from the dark and boundless space. It wrapped around the system's hand. The system protected Wei Wei Bai's soul with one hand and scolded through gritted teeth, "Fuck you, Yi Yuxuan, awakening my ass. Don't kill my host." It turned its wrist, and the ribbon broke. A scorching red flame burned away the power of the ribbon. With such a small amount of awakened soul, it was not qualified to touch Wei Wei Bai's soul in front of it. No matter what, it was still the big boss that everyone in the system world called Fourth Brother. The host it was protecting was not just the Chosen One, but also the Chosen One. Even if the main system came, it would not give up. Although the power of the ribbon was destroyed, the needle's position was still loose. The system endured the pain and was about to dial back. However, he discovered that the soul channel was beginning to shatter. The system glanced at the fate roulette unwillingly. It carried the clueless Wei Wei Bai and sped towards the end of the tunnel. Its body began to crumble in the next round. Sure enough, the system couldn't go against the destined genius. Every time it clashed with Yi Yuxuan, it had to shrink back. He had already tortured Yi Yuxuan to this extent. How could this man be so resilient? He was actually beginning to awaken. The system carefully placed Wei Wei Bai's soul back into her body. There was a terrifying power surging in the room. The system glanced and found that Yi Yuxuan was lying on the bed asleep. Under the bed, there was a faint golden light flowing. Suddenly, Yi Yuxuan seemed to feel something. He slowly opened his eyes. His black pupils stretched out and a few golden patterns appeared. The patterns were like the pattern on the fate roulette. The system rolled and crawled back to its trash, to prevent its existence from being exposed. Yi Yuxuan blinked and felt unusually sleepy. His head was a little dizzy. Chapter 1255. It was as if he didn't know where he was. He didn't know when his hand reached out, as if he wanted to grab something. He wanted to grab something. The gold in his eyes disappeared, and his mind still couldn't find an answer. Only a small part of his soul had been awakened, and he couldn't remember what he had done. But the dream of that cat still existed, although he was already very familiar with this kind of dream. But every time he lost her, he still couldn't bear it. Yi Yuxuan reached out and held her finger. The warm sensation made his cold brows loosen a little. It's been 3 days. She should wake up today. Yi Yuxuan rationally calculated the time when she woke up. He saw her eyelashes tremble, and the pain in her chest started to ease. Her eyes slowly opened, and there was still sleepiness in them. Yi Yuxuan silently sighed in relief. Every time he woke up from his dream, he was afraid that she would become the her in his dream. Once he fell asleep, he wouldn't wake up, and Wei Bai's first reaction when she woke up was to check her life points. In the end, the system disappeared without a sound. Wei Bai was puzzled, and she seemed to see something from the corner of her eyes. She turned her head in a daze, and a handsome and cold face appeared beside her. Yi Yuxuan had just slept for a while, and his originally neat short hair was a little messy. He looked at her indifferently, and his eyes were like bottomless abyss, but strangely gave people a feeling of gentleness. "You're awake." His voice was a little hoarse, and he couldn't help but smile. This smile was simply against the rules, and it crashed into the depths of Wei Bai's heart. She took a deep breath and ordered her heart not to overdrive. When she woke up, she saw a handsome face smiling at her. She was about to lose control of her evil thoughts. Thinking about her heart disease, she finally forced herself to calm down. This place is Wei Bai looked at the room blankly. This room was especially black, gray, and white, and the design was classy and smooth, but there was no trace of femininity. It was full of a postmodern design style. Cold, simple, and beautiful. That was her first impression of the room. Yi Yuxuan seemed to see her confusion and said lightly, "This is my house in the center of the city. You slept for 3 days, so I moved you here." Wei Bai propped herself up and looked up at him. "What do you mean by moving here?" "Yi Yuxuan, I'll take good care of you. I spend most of my time in the city and have a lot of work. It's more suitable for you to live here." "Oh, right." He paused quietly for a moment before saying, "Father-in-law also agrees." "Father-in-law also agreed?" Wei Bai refused to believe it. "My dad won't agree. We have nothing to do with each other." She had already rejected marriage. Moreover, Bai Changyan had also given up on doing business with the Yi family and was content to be a middle-level merchant. Therefore, Bai Changyan would never agree to Yi Yuxuan moving her away. Yi Yuxuan's voice was low and gentle with a hint of coaxing sweetness. He agreed. "I told him that I'm still very innocent. I've never had a girlfriend before, and I haven't even had any physical contact with other women. Even when women pounced on him occasionally, he would pull them away and throw them away at the first moment." Wei Bai was confused. What did this have to do with her father's agreement? Yi Yuxuan pretended to frown in distress. "So you were the one who taught me how to kiss for the first time. You were the one who gave me a hug for the first time. You were also the one who saw me naked for the first time. The first time I was crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Com download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. Com // to make it easier for you to read it next time. You can click save at the bottom to record this reading. Quick comma. Chapter 1256. What was it, other than touching, kissing and hugging. There was nothing else. Yi Yuxuan pretended to be helpless. He sighed pretentiously. After saying all this, father-in-law directly asked me to move you away, saying that he wanted to be responsible for me. I refused, but I was embarrassed, so I moved you away. Wei Wei Bai. Seeing her like this, Yi Yuxuan was afraid that she wouldn't believe him, so he picked up his phone and called Bai Changyan. The call was quickly connected. When Bai Changyan heard that Wei Wei Bai was awake, he said happily, Wei Wei, Dad is going to find his second love. Comfort Xian well. He's a pure and good child. Even if you want to reject him, you have to be gentle. He gave his first time to you. Wei Wei Bai, what first time? What second love? She just slept for 3 days, and the world turned upside down again. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She held back her doubts and asked, Dad, what does a second love mean? Bai Changyan said, Wei Wei, I'm old. Xian told me that to not be a burden to you in my old age, I must have a partner. Otherwise, wouldn't I be a burden to you? So I plan to find a partner to take care of each other. You can go and find your happiness. Wei Wei Bai, no, you won't be a burden, Dad. Bai Changyan, good child, I know your intentions. Communicate well with Xian. After all, so many of his first times have been taken away by you. He's actually a good person. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of poison did Xian feed you to make you betray him? After communicating with her father, she turned to glare at Yi Yuxuan. He had convinced her father. Well, a robot like him usually didn't care. If he really cared about something or wanted to please someone, it wouldn't be easy. Even a psychiatrist would cry because of him. Not to mention that her father was an honest and loyal old man who didn't know anything other than business. As long as Yi Yuxuan lowered herself, she would be tricked in minutes. Wei Wei Bai put down the phone expressionlessly. She was really not suitable to talk about marriage now. If it was possible, it would be a high-quality man like Yi Yuxuan. He pounced on her in a matter of minutes. After all, there weren't many good men in this world. Yi Yuxuan didn't gamble, whore, or mess around. He was handsome, rich, and could cook. Previously, he still had the problem of facial paralysis and indifference, but now it was all gone. Wei Wei Bai covered her chest and asked herself, who wouldn't be tempted by such a man? She couldn't be tempted. Wei Wei Bai wanted to get off the bed, but Yi Yuxuan stepped back and held her hand to support her. She looked at Yi Yuxuan awkwardly. Such a feast for the eyes. She turned her head away and told herself not to be swayed. Not to be swayed. This kind of man would never turn back once he was swayed. Wei Wei Bai calmly suppressed her inner thoughts and let down her guard. Her current state was not suitable to be a burden to others, and she had to let Yi Yuxuan know that her soul transmigrated every day to woo other men. Not to mention being together, he would probably feel that his hair was glowing like a green light bulb, illuminating the world. Who asked her to woo so many men? Wei Wei Bai was very vague and calm about the matters of the plane, but she still knew that when she had no bottom line, she wasn't human. Yi Yuxuan slowly rubbed his fingers against her fingertips and said casually, Get up and eat something first, then I'll take you out to bask in the sun. Your body has been lying down all this time. Fortunately, you wake up once every 3 days, so your body has a buffer period. Otherwise, your muscles might have atrophied. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com. Download of the full text: https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 12:57. Wei Wei Bai only felt that her fingers were numb. She thought that Yi Yuxuan was seducing her, but looking at his calm and serious face. Could it be a misunderstanding? Wei Wei Bai touched her dry stomach and bowed her head to the food. Let's talk about it later. As a result, when she followed Yi Yuxuan out, she saw Qin Xiu with a bitter face setting the table. He was wearing a small apron, with his sleeves rolled up, and was scooping porridge. Qin Xiu saw Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei, come and eat. It's medicinal porridge. I specially made it for you. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. What's going on? Why did Qin Xiu come to cook for Yi Yuxuan like a little wife? And everyone knew that she would wake up in 3 days. Every time she woke up or fainted, she didn't get any surprised reaction. Yi Yuxuan walked slowly to the chair and pulled it out. Eat, Wei Wei. Bai Weiwei didn't think too much about it. She walked over and sat down. But Yi Yuxuan's fingers slowly slid across the back of her neck. So light. He didn't give Wei Wei Bai any time to react at all, but it succeeded in making Wei Wei Bai tremble. She immediately looked back at Yi Yuxuan, only to find that he calmly pulled out the chair beside him, without showing a trace of strangeness. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows. What's with this kind of seduction technique? It's not like Yi Yuxuan style. Qin Xiu immediately sat down. Eat. I got up early in the morning to cook for you. I knew you would definitely wake up in 3 days. Wei Wei Bai was a little surprised. You cooked for me? Qin Xiu picked up the bowl. Yes, your dad asked me to take care of you, so I cooked. After eating, I'm going to the hospital. If your dad asks, you must say that I took care of you. Taking care of Yi Yuxuan when it came to cooking was the limit of what she could bear. If he continued to care for her, Yi Yuxuan would definitely hang him up and strangle him. Wei Wei Bai, why are you so obedient when my dad asked you to take care of him? Qin Xiu's craftsmanship was not as good as Yi Yuxuan's perversely accurate taste, but it was still not bad. Wei Wei Bai felt ashamed. Men nowadays were better at cooking than the other. Why was her food so disgusting? Was it a matter of talent? While Wei Wei Bai was eating, Yi Yuxuan gently nudged Wei Wei Bai's arm when she wanted to take the chopsticks. It was a touch that was neither light nor heavy. This kind of seductive but silent action that made it impossible for others to catch hold of. It was so alluring that it made one itch. Wei Wei Bai looked up and glanced at Yi Yuxuan. She found that his side profile was still very calm, without a trace of shyness from doing something bad. Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. This little trick was simply at the kindergarten level. She didn't know what Yi Yuxuan's HP was like. After all, it was a stable period recently. Even if his HP increased, it shouldn't be much. She sighed. She couldn't be moved by this little goblin in front of her. She still didn't have enough HP. She had to at least live until she was 80 years old to not be a burden. When her HP was full, if Yi Yuxuan still found her pleasing to the eye, then they could be together. Thinking like this, Yi Yuxuan dropped his chopsticks. He casually lowered his body and stretched out his slender and beautiful fingers to take the chopsticks. But the chopsticks were a little far away. He whispered, Wei Wei, the chopsticks are at your feet. Take them. Qin Xiu, who was eating and wanted to go to the hospital quickly, was a little confused. The chopsticks fell. Didn't Yi Yuxuan never care? Anyway, there were servants who would clean up. No, Yi Yuxuan never dropped his chopsticks. Chapter 1258. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment before she bent down and reached for the chopsticks. When she lowered her head, Yi Yuxuan looked up as if nothing had happened. His lips brushed past her delicate lips. Wei Wei Bai, Yi Yuxuan's eyes darkened, but there was a hint of surprise in his voice. It's too close. This is an accident. Wei Wei Bai endured. She grabbed the chopsticks and was about to put them back on the table to get a new one. However, just as she lifted her body, Yi Yuxuan hurried over to take the chopsticks from her hand. Just give it to me. Just like that, his head bumped right into hers. It wasn't heavy, but it still made Wei Wei Bai unable to come back to her senses. Yi Yuxuan's face flashed with a hint of annoyance. He immediately reached out to touch her forehead. Why does it hurt? His fingers were warm, and when they touched her slightly cold forehead, it was a kind of silent comfort. But his fingertips gently caressed her hairline. It made her scalp tingle. This little action was a god-level seduction. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to push it away, but when she didn't, Yi Yuxuan succeeded. Yi Yuxuan saw that she was in a daze and let go of his hand. There was a hint of worry in his eyes. Then, he gently kissed her forehead. Her forehead didn't hurt. His kiss just made her feel more impactful. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She was really stunned by his seemingly normal but especially obvious seduction. Yi Yuxuan sighed beautifully. It won't hurt anymore after a kiss. Wei Wei Bai, Qin Shan, who was eating at the side. Could there be a more obvious lie? Yi Yuxuan let go of her and then naturally took a new chopstick. He didn't have a trace of pride in taking advantage of her. He was still calm, rational, and could even be said to be full of damned abstinence. He glanced at her indifferently. "Let's eat." Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and glared at him for a while before gulping down the porridge to nourish her stomach. Qin Shou also finished eating. He wiped his mouth with a paper towel and said, "You guys continue to talk about love. I'm leaving. Goodbye. I won't see you two again. Don't you feel bad for bullying a single dog like me? What do you mean by touching his head and kissing his forehead?" Damn it, he would protest too. He also wanted to find someone to kiss on the forehead. Qin Shou ran away, leaving only Wei Wei Bai and Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan felt a little better. Wei Wei Bai felt gloomy. She struggled between reason and insanity. Sometimes, Yi Yuxuan's damned seduction method was especially irritable. It felt like there was a damned little goblin around, shyly stripping off her clothes to seduce you, but when you really pounce on her, he would only look confused and innocent, completely not admitting that he was seducing people. Shameless. Yi Yuxuan saw her annoyed face, and his eyes flashed with a few traces of laughter. After the meal, the servant also cleaned up the table. Then, the well-trained servant disappeared again. If it wasn't for the cleaning, the servant wouldn't come back. Yi Yuxuan opened his laptop and began to deal with some things. Wei Wei Bai had nothing to do. She held the juice and pondered how to open her mouth. Yi Yuxuan finished dealing with a project when he heard her voice with some hesitation. "Yi Yuxuan, it's not appropriate for us to live together now." Yi Yuxuan didn't raise his head. His fingers quickly began to deal with the next important official business. He casually replied, "It's not living together. I'm taking care of you." Your father agreed. "Wei Wei Bai, I'm an adult. Guardians can't interfere with my decisions." T. Chapter 12:59. Yi Yuxuan looked up, his eyes soft. "No, you have a guardian. Your illness is classified as a mental illness, so you're not a fully independent adult. You are a child who needs a guardian to take care of you." A mentally ill person needed a guardian. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. "Mental illness?" Yi Yuxuan nodded. "My doctor said so." "Wei Wei Bai, you were the one who said it, right?" This made-up story is so calm and even wants to throw the blame on you. "Your doctor, isn't he Qin Xiu?" Yi Yuxuan's distressed voice sounded. "So now, you should listen to your father." Wei Wei Bai snorted. "What can you do if I don't listen to you?" Using her father to threaten her? There was no deterrence at all. Yi Yuxuan's fake distress disappeared, and he looked at her without any expression. Then he stood up, came in front of her, and put his hands gently on her shoulders. The warmth of his palms passed through her clothes, and there was a kind of friction. Wei Wei Bai couldn't move, and her breathing was a little messy. Yi Yuxuan had already bent down gracefully, and his thin lips were close to her ear. He said softly, "If you don't listen to your father, then I can only change your guardian. For example, me. Is that okay?" Clearly, he asked if she was okay, but his actions were restrained, and his tone was domineering. It felt like her answer was not important at all. He had the final say. At this moment, Wei Wei Bai was suppressed by his aura. Yi Yuxuan saw that she didn't dare to make a sound, so he chuckled softly and let go of her. His fingers slid over her shoulders, and he succeeded in making her tremble. There was a hint of heat in his eyes, but he didn't do anything excessive. "Take it slow. Don't scare her." Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. She felt that Yi Yuxuan's entire attitude had changed. He seemed to have become more proactive and seductive. Wasn't she the one who took the initiative? When she didn't want to flirt with him, he rushed to flirt with her. Indeed, every dog has its day. Yi Yuxuan's attitude was very clear. If she was not obedient, he would not live with her. He was about to change guardians. What did guardian mean? Apart from her parents, it was her husband, so he was brazenly proposing to her. Wei Wei Bai touched her face. It was a little hot. She said to the silent system, "Sai, seriously, I clearly don't want a relationship, but this man is forcing it on me." The system saw that Yi Yuxuan's attention was diverted to work. Finally, he dared to say in a low voice, "Just refuse directly." Wei Wei Bai said, "You don't understand. This is a problem that only perfect people have. If I refuse, and he doesn't let go, then the situation will be very awkward. We can't be so rude. After all, Yi Yuxuan is my life." "You're perfect," What a perfect narcissist. Wei Wei Bai said. It's good that you know. The system turned around. The host was as thick-skinned as always. Wei Wei Bai said, how's my life points? The system saw that Yi Yuxuan was not paying attention to it. So, it immediately said, as usual. Now your external life points can be expanded to 2,500 days. You received 30 days of life points from the previous mission, 2 days of small mission rewards, and 10 days of Chinese New Year Red Packet rewards. You have a total of 1562 HP, innate HP. After deducting the life points spent on the mission, you have 1,400 days of life points left. /T. Chapter 1260. Wei Wei Bai did some mental calculations. You ate more than 10 days of my life points. System, why was the host able to accurately calculate how much instant noodles it ate, even though it was so vague? Wei Wei Bai, forget it. It's not easy for you either. Eat it. Her family's Tongzi was so pitiful that she was too embarrassed to blame it. The system was touched. The host was still a good person. It said emotionally, "Oh right, Yi Yuxuan's life points are off the charts again. When he was flirting with you just now, his life points automatically increased by about 500. Wei Wei Bai's eyes lit up and looked straight at Yi Yuxuan. She wanted to kneel down and call him daddy. She was attacking the plane, and in the end, she even lost her life points. In the end, Yi Yuxuan, this master, casually increased her life points to 2,000. Wei Wei Bai, if it weren't for the fact that I can't be moved, I would have been unable to control myself and flirted with him to increase my life points. The system didn't dare to say anything again, because Yi Yuxuan turned back to look at Wei Wei Bai again. He saw Wei Wei Bai obediently sitting on the sofa, holding her fruit juice in a daze. Like a lazy cat, it only stayed in his domain. This feeling was really good. Yi Yuxuan looked down lightly and looked at the chat screen on the laptop. Tell me more specifically, what did you see? Yi Yuxuan's eyes darkened. Thinking about what the person over there did, he typed the characters. Boundless gold. Golden powder sprinkled down from the dark void. That person asked, what's in the gold? Yi Yuxuan. Red flames. Red flames appeared from the gold. That person said, boundless, void darkness, red flames, fate. Yi Yuxuan asked, fate? The man said, my eyes can only see this much. The power of what you see is too great for my ability to bear. Yi Yuxuan expressionlessly propped up her chin and thought for a while. His rational mind was constantly calculating and repeatedly analyzing what he was seeing. Finally, he typed, can you leave your place? The man said, no, I'm blind and can't go out. But you can bring her here and see if I can predict her future. Yi Yuxuan, oh, the future. I heard that you don't even need to come into contact with others to know their fate. Can you see my future now? The man said, no. The two no's carried an incomparable coldness. Yi Yuxuan stared at the word no. That person continued, your future is a gigantic and terrifying abyss, an abyss that even my eyes cannot peer into. Yi Yuxuan didn't show much emotion. I want to know if there's a way to change the dream. The man said, dream. That's not a dream, not a dream. Yi Yuxuan didn't seem surprised at all, as if she already knew this fact. The man said, how do you want to change it? Yi Yuxuan tilted her head and glanced at Wei Wei Bai, who was drinking fruit juice with her head down. She didn't know where her mind was wandering. His expression was gentle for a moment. Then he turned back and typed, I want her to never be able to leave me. She kept on leaving him, risking everything to obtain his love, just to leave his world. Yi Yuxuan accurately guessed. I already know what she wants to do. She needs my love. No matter how much I hurt her, she will take the initiative to chase after me and make me fall in love with her. Then she will just abandon me like she's abandoning trash. /save button below to record this reading. Chapter 1261. Wei Wei Bai only wanted his love. Once he fell in love with her, he had no value. This was the truth accumulated from so many dreams. He experienced it one dream after another, thinking that it was their previous life. Every time she woke up, it coincided with his dream, and he guessed that she was asleep. That dream was synchronized with his. It was not the memories of their previous lives. Later, he finally discovered a terrifying pattern. Every time he completely fell in love with her, she would leave him. The rationality in his mind calculated these coincidences and finally discovered a fact that was not a coincidence. For some reason, she needed his love to leave the dream. She woke up from a vegetative state. Yi Yuxuan, I suspect that her life depends on my love to continue. Perhaps in the beginning, on the day she had a heart attack, the doctor announced that she might not be able to hold on and would die. But later on, she miraculously woke up. He should have known that she needed his love at that time to wake up, because his dream started at that time. That person said, I saw her future was vague and dark. It was similar to yours, but not as scary as yours. It was more like her fate was intertwined with Yi Yuxuan's. Yi Yuxuan's abyss of darkness covered her originally ordinary life, so he could not see Wei Wei Bai's specific future. Yi Yuxuan, can you make it so that she can't leave me so easily? That person said, is it to change the ending of the tragedy? Yi Yuxuan, yes, I don't want her to stay in the dream forever, but at least stay with me until we're old. He did not want her to leave again and again. He had a terrible premonition that if he watched her leave him like this again, even if she woke up in reality, he would not be able to bear it and explode. As for the consequences of exploding, he was actually a little confused. There was only one thing he was sure of. He would not hurt her. That person said, bring her to me. I'll see if I can change it. After saying that, the person on the other side disconnected. Yi Yuxuan's account also automatically transferred a considerable amount of money to that person's account. Yi Yuxuan looked up and saw that person's account name. Blind fortune teller, fortune telling, marriage, career, misfortune, and the gender of a second child. You're not allowed to be free. If he didn't know that this person really had a book, he would have seen this kind of small advertisement. He didn't want to talk to him at all. Yi Yuxuan turned off their communication and glanced at Wei Wei Bai's head. The golden powder was still there, and Wei Wei Bai shouldn't be able to see it. She sat on the sofa, oblivious. Her toes were casually placed on the carpet, and her fair ankles were exceptionally delicate. As Yi Yuxuan looked at her, she automatically overlapped her with the woman in her dream. She should have a different appearance in his dream, but he couldn't remember what she looked like. But he knew that she was enough. The follow-up to A Singer's Ex-Boyfriend is a Cat. The concert venue was packed with fans, and the scalpers were selling like crazy. A ticket was sold at a sky-high price, and it was still being fought over. It was a huge stage for 100,000 people. The votes were sold in an instant. Even at the peak of Oh Jinma's popularity, ticket sales weren't as fast as today, because this concert was Oh Jinma's last concert. After Wei Wei Bai's death was announced, there was a wave of condolences on the internet. //. Chapter 1262. Her song was also made into an album by Oh Jinma. The sales skyrocketed, and the album was constantly out of stock. The industry was also full of good reviews. At the same time, Oh Jinma was silent. He didn't send any news. It seemed that he was too weak to stand up because of Wei Wei Bai's death. Everyone knew how much he loved Wei Wei Bai. During the half-year, when Wei Wei Bai was in a vegetative state, he took care of Wei Wei Bai's news, and he matured and grew up. A man's mature charm was more attractive than an angel's. It increased his popularity instead of decreasing. But Wei Wei Bai's death cut off his news. The fans waited for a long time before they received news of this concert. What shocked the fans was that it was actually his farewell concert. No matter how much they couldn't accept it, Oh Jinma had already made up his mind, and no one could change it. When the concert was about to start, the assistant appeared backstage with a worried expression. Brother Mo, it's about to start. A man sat quietly on the chair. Under the lights, his amber eyes were so clean and cold that it was scary. It was barren and emotionless. Oh Jinma looked up at the assistant and nodded. Then he picked up his guitar and walked onto the stage. The assistant looked at his lonely back and suddenly thought of the day Wei Wei Bai died. No, actually 3 days had already passed. There was no news from Oh Jinma, so he went to look for him. Then he found that Oh Jinma was burying a cat. The big-faced cat had died of old age. It was already very old, and it spent the last year of its life being adopted by Wei Wei Bai. Then it met Jinma, and its life became better. The assistant saw that the cat had died. Although he was sad, he wasn't shocked. He said, "Brother Imo, the cat is dead. Is Sister Wei very sad?" Was it because Wei Wei Bai was sad, and he was too busy comforting her that he didn't contact them? Jinma buried the cat in silence. Then he turned around. His chin was full of stubble, and there were dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he was dispirited and haggard. The assistant was shocked. "Brother Imo, what's wrong?" Jinma looked at him expressionlessly and said, "Go and contact them. I want to send Wei Wei away." It was only after he sent Wei Wei away that he found out. Wei Wei Bai was dead. Meanwhile, Jinma had been guarding the dead Wei Wei Bai for 3 whole days. Not eating or drinking, just guarding a corpse like this? If Jinma didn't think that Wei Wei Bai would rot at this rate, he wouldn't have asked his assistant to contact the funeral parlor. This was because Jinma felt that Wei Wei Bai would definitely not like him leaving in an ugly state. When she had turned into a cat, there were many times when she disliked the big-faced cat. That was why she cared about her appearance. On the day of the funeral, there was a heavy downpour. It seemed like Jinma had deliberately chosen it. The weather forecast said that it would be the heaviest rain of the year. The funeral was quiet and simple. There were a few helpers, but the main one was Jinma. When it was time to bury the ashes, the storm came as expected. It actually hurt when the rain hit the body. However, Jinma said, "You guys could go down a mountain first." The storm blinded everyone's eyes. They only saw Jinma standing straight in front of Wei Wei Bai's tombstone quietly. The assistant had no choice but to lead the helpers down the mountain. He knew that Jinma needed a quiet space. Before he went down the mountain, he turned around and saw Jinma kneeling in front of the tombstone. He seemed to be holding a red velvet box tightly in his hand. There should be a ring in that box. He was very familiar with it, because when Jinma bought the ring, he had also helped him with a reference. Transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. /transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. // transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. Transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. Transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1263. It seemed like he was waiting for Wei Wei Bai to wake up so that he could propose to her immediately. The rain was so heavy that it blurred Jinma's figure. However, the assistant knew that Jinma's heart-wrenching cries were buried in the heavy rain. This was also the reason why Jinma chose to hold the funeral on such a stormy day. This was the only way that no one could hear his cries of losing Wei Wei Bai. On the stage, Jinma hugged his guitar and looked at everyone indifferently. The glow sticks were like stars that lit up the entire stage. He was too used to this scene. He was used to a lively stage. He knew his own personality. He was actually afraid of being alone. Even though he liked to write songs in peace, he was actually someone who couldn't stand being alone. Hence, on the stage, his fans became his pillars of support. Their liveliness made him feel less lonely. This was also why he was so afraid of being abandoned by his fans. After Wei Wei Bai appeared, he realized that he didn't need a stage or fans anymore, because her existence was his greatest peace of mind. Jinma adjusted the microphone and said indifferently, "The song I want to sing today is I Have You for the Rest of My Life, and I Have You for the Rest of My Life." He still remembered how he felt when he saw her release this song on Weibo. He was very happy. He had never been so happy. He was so happy that a big boy who was afraid of being alone suddenly became strong and mature, because he knew that there was someone who held him in her heart. He was no longer the Jinma who had no fans and nothing. Someone wanted him. Jinma tried his best to sing. However, he realized that he couldn't sing that kind of happiness. As he sang, all the fans at the scene cried. On the other hand, Jinma was expressionless. There wasn't a single tear in his eyes. He sat there in a daze for a long time. The stage was silent. However, no one protested. Jinma suddenly laughed at himself. "Actually, I used to think that you were the most important people to me. You were my motivation to improve. You were the ones who pushed me to the top of the music industry. But later on, I met her. I'm actually not an angel. I'm selfish and evil. I knew that her real song might have been stolen by Jiang Ro, but I still allowed her to be attacked by you. Because she knows that my name is Big Tree. I come from the countryside. I used to climb up the tree naked. I also stole her sweet potatoes and ate them like a hungry ghost. Ojima said this and smiled faintly. He wasn't embarrassed at all. Look, I'm not the noble prince or the elegant angel. He lowered his head and looked at the guitar. Her name is Xiaohua. She came to this city because of me. I'm afraid that she will tell you that I'm just a village boy. I'm pretending to date her, but I'm actually lying to her. This was his dark history. Could cause great destruction, could. But he didn't care was Jinma. I was lying. Me. I was lying. I was lying. Was. The fans quieted down. They watched him slowly talk about his selfish past. Ojima, later on, I was slapped in the face. I fell in love with her. She gave me everything you could give me. Security, happiness, and anticipation for the future. Maturity and strength. She gently changed him into a responsible man. Chapter 1264. I thought that after losing her, all of you would be able to give me some support. Jinma touched his guitar and smiled helplessly. In the end, it didn't work. All of you are no longer meaningful to me. Fans were no longer of any use, because he realized that Wei Bai could give him something. No one could give him anything. Ojima's pale face had no makeup. His fair fingers strummed the guitar strings. His fragile skin was cut by the strings, but he didn't feel any pain. I wrote a song, The Big Tree and the Little Flower. He wanted to tell her that he was the big tree next door, and she was his little flower. The song was light and beautiful, and it was Wei Bai's style. But it was so sad that people couldn't suppress the urge to cry. The concert venue became a mourning for Wei Bai's funeral. Ojima was the calmest one. After he finished the song, his fingers were cut by the guitar strings, and the guitar was stained with blood. When the curtain fell, Ojima said to everyone, "Goodbye. We won't see each other again. Won't see each other again." The person he wanted to see was really gone. After that, the fans couldn't see any news of Ojima anymore. He really left just like that. He didn't make a comeback, and there was no news about him. He disappeared from the face of the earth. His assistant could contact him occasionally. Although he left, the dividends from Sanqing's shares were still given to him. He didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Even if he didn't do anything, there wouldn't be any problems with material matters. One Christmas, his assistant finally found out that he was singing on the streets of a certain country. The assistant ran over and saw Ojinma wearing a mask. His hair was messy, and his clothes were messy. He was carrying Wei Bai's guitar and had a hat by his feet. He didn't know how long he had been singing. There were many coins in the hat and a large amount of money. Ojima sat by the roadside. Snow fell on his hair and shoulders. He looked at his assistant indifferently, then pretended not to know him. He picked up the hat, poured out the coins in it, and put the hat on his head. Then, he carried the guitar and walked back. Her long back was still beautiful, but she had a downtrodden temperament. The assistant followed him and found that he was staying at the best hotel. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. In fact, knowing that he had never mistreated them materially, they were not so anxious. But he still lived like a vagrant. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared again. They were able to find out which country he was in through his spending records, but they couldn't find any trace of him. Later on, his assistant heard that he had gone to the Antarctic tundra alone. Then, he never came back. In the end, Ojinma couldn't find his own happiness and self-destructed because of his spiritual support. When the assistant was old enough to have dementia, he could still remember the story of Big Tree and Little Blossom. He cried whenever he thought about it. He didn't even know why he was crying. That story clearly had nothing to do with him. Yi Yuxuan sighed faintly. The man in her dream had traveled all over the world. After he had seen enough of the beautiful scenery, he searched for everyone. He would never be able to find another woman who could bring him happiness. He could understand Ojinma's feelings of being a vagrant in the end. He couldn't bear to lose the most important person. He could only numb himself and search for someone who was similar to her to comfort his broken heart. In the end, he self-destructed. Perhaps, if this continued, he would self-destruct one day. Wei Wei Bai sensed that Yi Yuxuan's gaze was especially strange. She shouted for the system. The system didn't dare to make a sound. Wei Wei Bai, this stupid system always dropped the ball. When it was about time to sleep, Wei Wei Bai stared at the only bed in the room. This was a proper 5-person bed. No matter how she rolled, it wouldn't fall to the ground. In the bathroom, the sound of Yi Yuxuan washing up could be heard. She tried her best to control herself and not move her head towards the bathroom. Because that damn bathroom was half open, the door was frosted glass. She could see the hazy water vapor. Under the steam, a perfect and muscular body was moving seductively with the steam. Yi Yuxuan actually renovated this kind of bathroom. She couldn't tell that he was so open. Wei Wei Bai struggled in her heart. She had to sleep on the sofa. If she didn't let Yi Yuxuan have any ideas, it would be bad. It was just the two of them. What if he couldn't control his beastly nature? The bathroom door opened. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but turn around to take a look. Dense steam flowed out. Yi Yuxuan casually draped a short towel around his waist. Under his smooth forehead, a pair of beautiful eyes were stained with steam, bringing about a natural sexiness. The lines from his shoulders to his chest were just right. His muscles weren't that exaggerated, but they were especially good-looking. When he walked, his slender legs were faintly discernible under the scarf. Wei Wei Bai stared blankly for a moment. Then, she turned her head with difficulty. Out of sight, out of mind. Yi Yuxuan walked to her side. As if by accident, the towel around his waist fell to the ground. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and saw the towel fall by her feet. The man was incomparably indifferent. He bent over, revealing his strong waist. He reached out his hand and slowly placed it on Wei Wei Bai's leg. Wei Wei, the towel is a little far. Help me hold it. Wei Wei Bai, don't stop me. I'm going to strangle this damned little vixen. /, Chapter 1265. Wei Wei Bai's hands trembled as she reached for the damn towel. A slender hand was suddenly placed on the back of her hand. His wet fingers and short nails gently scratched the back of her hand. Bai Weiwei's body stiffened, but she heard the man's low, frosted voice. I thought you wouldn't take it. So he took it for himself. He was innocent. He didn't have to go to jail for murder and arson. He saw her bend down to take it, so he bent down to touch her hand. Wei Wei Bai endured. She endured the explosion. Was he done? He was doing it on purpose. He was definitely doing it on purpose. He was doing it on purpose. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was enduring like a little wife. It wasn't like her at all. If he dared to show it, why wouldn't she dare to look? She picked up the towel and suddenly looked up. She saw his underwear. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of underwear are you wearing under the towel? Or boxers? Wei Wei Bai gave a fake smile and passed the towel to Yi Yuxuan. Hold your towel properly. Don't drop it again. Yi Yuxuan looked at her deeply and then took it. This sound coming from his nose simply gave people goosebumps. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but reach out to touch her arm. Then he got on the bed as if he had no other purpose. Bai Weiwei was seduced, neither up nor down. She couldn't help but ask the system, did Yi Yuxuan take the wrong medicine? Why was he taking the initiative to seduce her, and in such a scheming way? The system was facing the harmonious bullet screen army and couldn't hear the host's words at all. Yes, the bullet screen army was upgraded again. The towel hadn't dropped yet. When Yi Yuxuan walked out half-naked, the system was blocked. Wei Wei Bai didn't hear the system's reply and suddenly wondered if the system was in love. How could it disappear like that? Blocked system. Injustice. Wei Wei Bai dawdled again. She nestled on the sofa and watched Yi Yuxuan sit on the bed and read a book. She didn't look like a little fairy at all. After flirting with her, he put on a serious expression. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and tugged at the blanket on the sofa, intending to make do with the sofa for the night. She had already said that she was not tempted. She had to have a backbone and not be tempted like this. Her self-control was very strong. Yi Yuxuan faintly lowered his head. Under the white light, his bare upper body and the beautiful lines of his muscles moved with him, and there was a kind of temptation that made people unable to look away. His hands, however, were as flawless as jade as he gently flipped through the pages of the book. So what if he was reading a book? Was he reading a pornographic book? How could she be tempted by flipping the pages of a book? Wei Wei Bai pulled the blanket over her head and then lay down on the sofa with her back facing Yi Xuan. Out of sight, out of mind. Her damned heart. It was going to beat faster again. She spat at her own heart. Why is it beating? Don't you know that your heart is disabled? If it beats too fast, it will die. She reached out and clutched her chest, trying hard to delete the seductive images of Yi Yuxuan's body in her mind. For someone like her who was used to seeing all kinds of big scenes, she shouldn't lose her composure like this. She was used to seeing big scenes. Wei Wei Bai repeated the brainwashing and finally succeeded a little. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out from behind her. Then, when she was unprepared, her whole body was lifted up. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Her face was pressed against a warm skin, and under the skin, there was the steady sound of a heartbeat. Is at https://www.sashu.com/ Chapter 1266. Sound after sound, along with the warmth of the skin on his chest, made by Wei Wei's face redden. This was uncontrollable. It was a woman's instinct that was aroused by strong male temptation and hormones. It was useless to be used to big scenes. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened as Yi Yuxuan carried her to the bed. In fact, when she was flirting with Yi Yuxuan in the past, she was really fearless to the point of being lawless. But that was because she had no other thoughts about him. That was why she could mess around. But now, she was clear about the change in her feelings. That was why she started to shrink back and didn't dare to cross the line easily. She had seen many cases of wooing others and wooing herself in the end. In fact, if it wasn't for the system's emotional shield, she probably wouldn't have been able to hold on to so many strategies, because feelings were both sides. Her acting skills were based on her being unmoved, so no matter how much she was hurt, as long as her heart was calm, she was able to stand up countless times without any fear. Some people said that only when one had true feelings could they influence the person they wanted to woo. Actually, it was wrong. She had feelings from the beginning. Then, she couldn't strictly control everything. Jealousy, happiness, sadness, pain. Once these emotions surfaced, there was no need to do anything. She would lose no matter what. On the contrary, people who were unmoved in their hearts could be in an invincible position. In reality, Wei Wei Bai really felt that kind of heavy feelings. This made her look at Yi Yuxuan as if she was looking at a bomb, and it was a strawberry-flavored bomb. It would be a pity if she didn't open it. Yi Yuxuan put her on the bed. His arm muscles bulged slightly. He sat on the bed sideways and pulled the blanket over. What are you afraid of? I won't force you. Wei Wei Bai trembled. She felt that when Yi Yuxuan said that he wouldn't force her, the look in his eyes was like that of a big bad wolf, naked and scorching. She slowly shifted her body, changing her position so that she wasn't so close to Yi Yuxuan. She did not insist on sleeping on the sofa. It was not a matter of being pretentious or not. But if she really insisted on sleeping on the sofa, Yi Yuxuan would probably be happy to hug her a few times. The more he hugged her, the more he would have the chance to do that. She had to work hard to isolate the ambiguous atmosphere between them. Yi Yuxuan didn't seem to understand what she was thinking. Instead, she moved her body naturally. He squeezed her. Wei Wei Bai was cursing in her heart. This was harassment and molestation. The bed was so big. She had shrunk to the side of the bed and was about to fall off, but this arsonist was still pushing his luck. His chest pressed against her back, and the fiery temperature simply boiled her body. Her whole body was red, and her breathing began to become heavy and chaotic again. Wei Wei Bai resisted with all her might. Yi Yuxuan, stay away from me. The bed is so big. Yi Yuxuan said lightly, the blanket is too thin. I'm a little cold. Wei Wei Bai, cool my foot. This room is designed to automatically adjust all kinds of temperature to ensure that it can be maintained at the most comfortable temperature for the human body. How is it cold? She resisted stubbornly. If you're cold, then get more blankets. If you continue like this, I'm going to sleep in another room. Actually, She wanted to sleep in separate rooms from the beginning. Why did she only think of this now? It was all Yi Yuxuan's seduction that made her dizzy. Yi Yuxuan's voice was still indifferent. There are no extra blankets, and there are no other rooms here. This room was designed for me alone. There is no room for outsiders. To read the at https://www.sashu.com/ to read at https://www.sashu.com to read at https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 1267. Wei Wei Bai clutched her chest and complained to the system. Yi Yuxuan, that rascal, has gone astray. He kept biting and flirting with me. My heart disease relapsed. I had no choice but to run away. The system's face was cold, coward. He's a 10,000-year-old stone man. Can't you handle him? Wei Wei Bai was an old demon. There was no reason for her to have a heart attack because of Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Even the stone man has become a demon. He was no longer the little Xian who didn't know anything and would get shy when she pressed him against the wall. The system said, but your life points increased to 2,500. Keep it up next time. Wei Wei Bai said, I can't wait to kneel down and worship Yi Yuxuan. Without Yi Yuxuan, she really couldn't live. If it wasn't for her short life, she would have submitted to Yi Yuxuan. After all, it was common to repay a life-saving grace with one's body. Of course, if the person repaying the grace had a face full of pockmarks. Sorry, I'll be your slave in my next life, but don't even think about it in this life. Wei Wei Bai suddenly realized that something was wrong. She was wearing a tattered dress, sitting in a pool of blood and mud. Her fair fingers were full of blood and mud. It was raining, torrential rain. The ground was full of corpses, washed by the rain. The air was filled with the smell of blood. She looked around and saw that everything was red. Bai Weiwei felt that another incomparably savage plane had arrived. Then she suddenly felt cold all over. Under the cold rain and blood, under the gloomy sky, a figure slowly appeared. He was wearing a black robe, holding a long sword in his hand. The sword was full of horrible bloodstains. After being washed by the rain for so long, it still hadn't been washed clean. The man wore a black mask, like a god of death. He stepped on the corpses and walked towards Wei Wei Bai. His voice was cold and calm. The next saintess of the demon sect? This mission is to obtain the love of No Trace of Snow. Target: No trace of snow. Progress: 0 time, 8 months. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss. Her long dress was torn, revealing a pair of snow-white feet. A silver bell hung on her ankle, and blood stained her white toes. There was a strange mixture of cleanliness and seductiveness. The man's cold eyes were not moved at all. He raised his sword. In your next life, don't be a member of the devil sect. Wei Wei Bai meow meow meow. What about the memory input? It was just a strategy quest. She was completely confused about her current situation. Was she going to be sent back the moment she transmigrated? The man's sword was extremely nimble. Wei Wei Bai suddenly rolled on the ground. She was not afraid of getting dirty. After avoiding this dangerous attack, she got up and ran away. However, the white sword light cut through the clothes on her back. Her clothes were suddenly torn, revealing a large area of her thin, snow-white back. Her white and tender skin was beautiful under the washing of the rain. The red blood lotus on her shoulder was in full bloom. The man's sword was about to pierce through her heart. But when he saw this flower, he immediately stopped. This is Wei Wei Bai hugged the torn clothes with both hands and ran into the depths of the fog without a care. Suddenly, there were many footsteps in the distance. The man looked up and sneered. Then, he put away his sword and followed Wei Wei Bai's footsteps. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. Wei Wei Bai had already received the memory. She was the daughter of the demon sect's saintess and the next saintess. The saintess did not have martial arts. She was like a mascot in the demon sect, an ambassador of the public relations department. And the man just now, who wanted to kill her with a sword, was called No Trace of Snow. He was the leader of the Wulin Alliance. Chapter 1268. the leader of Wulin, the saintess of the demonic sect. This was a love-hate relationship. Wei Wei Bai expressed that she was not looking forward to it at all. As for why the leader of Wulin wore a mask to kill the demonic sect, it could not be seen by others. It was because the leader of Wulin had an even more terrifying identity. He was the leader of the demonic sect. Wei Wei Bai expressed that this was a messy relationship. She glanced at No Trace of Snow's information and could only praise this old man as a werewolf, a little more than a ruthless person. This man was crazy to the point of morbidity. He liked to play with people's hearts and was terrifyingly hypocritical. His biggest interest was behind the scenes, planning terrifying massacres time and time again. Then, when no one could catch the murderer, he would put on the white robe of the leader of Wulin, appearing holy and elegant. He would start to solve the case and bring the murderer to justice. He enjoyed the worship of the entire Wulin. But she was wrong when she transmigrated. The leader of the demonic sect had actually died a year ago. No Trace of Snow killed him. Since then, he had been wearing a mask and controlling all the affairs of the demonic sect. In this year, the demonic sect had killed many Orthodox Wulin sects and destroyed many Orthodox Wulin sections. This was the work of Xue Wuhan, who had done it. No Trace of Snow felt bored after making the demonic sect a scapegoat, so he planned today's massacre of the demonic sect. The leader of the demonic sect had killed his own people. He thought of the pain of those who trusted him before they died and the shock of being betrayed. No Trace of Snow felt that he had obtained great satisfaction. The original owner had no interaction with No Trace of Snow, because before she was the saintess, she was just an ordinary member of the demonic sect, the inconspicuous kind. So, although everyone knew that her mother was the saintess, she was very likely to be the next saintess, but she still had no sense of existence. This also caused No Trace of Snow to almost never meet the original owner. No, they just met. He had come to kill her with a sword. As for why No Trace of Snow liked to do this kind of thing, because he was a pervert. This man was peerless in appearance, elegant in demeanor, and unparalleled in martial arts. He was one of the most admired figures in the world. He had 0 negative reviews in the Wulin world. Furthermore, because he had killed many great demons, he had successfully become the Wulin Alliance Master. If he stopped just like that, he would be the current Holy Father, the type who shrouded the earth in holy light. He would be a divine figure. However, No Trace of Snow was a hypocrite in private and loved to torment people. What he loved the most was to let someone experience the best of everything, and then he would personally shatter it and enjoy the agonizing howls of others before they died. Wei Wei Bai expressed that she really knew too little about perverts. These freaks came in all shapes and sizes, and No Trace of Snow was the most abnormal and peculiar one. What kind of lunatic was this? Furthermore, she still had to conquer this lunatic. She had to change her target. If she didn't change, she didn't seem to have a choice. Wei Wei Bai, Tongzi, this kind of freak is a bit out of line. The system, they're even more out of line. It flipped through the notification and said, Side mission, earn 100 heartache points. It was too early for him to complete this side quest. Was it because it was too late in the previous plane, so I had to make up for this one? Before Wei Wei Bai could be confused, the system explained, this side mission is related to the time you have to conquer the next plane. Wei Wei Bai was confused. What conquering time? Isn't it the main system that gives out the time? The system. Didn't we submit an application last time? You want a plane with a longer conquering time. Chapter 1269. Wei Wei Bai, there was actually such a thing. Oh, right, there was such a thing. But the application was too long ago. She had forgotten. The system said, our application was approved. Because we didn't have money to bribe others, we applied for the worst plan, which means that the difficulty level of this plane will be increased by 3 times. Wei Wei Bai said, I think every plane is extremely difficult, and the most difficult one is the one where we have to cut off the penis. Although this plane had the saint of the demonic sect and the fake martial arts alliance master. But if they really wanted to conquer it, it shouldn't be 3 times harder. The system said, this plane won't remind you of the favorability level. There are only 3 chances to do so, and they are when it's 0, 50, and 100. Wei Bai, so difficult, there was no favorability level notification. It was more difficult for her to tell if the other party was sincere or not, so she could only rely on her own rich experience. The system said, also, if the heartbreaking value is 100, then the conquering time for the next plane will be a lifetime. Wei Bai immediately perked up. A lifetime conquering time. She didn't have to be chased by time anymore. The system said, if the heartbreaking is unsuccessful, then this application is invalid. In fact, when it applied, it didn't think it would succeed. But when Yi Yuxuan awakened a small part of his soul, he started to tamper with the needle of the fate roulette. Wei Bai, who had always been unlucky, received his blessing of luck. The application was approved. When Yi Yuxuan tampered with a needle, his purpose seemed to be to keep Wei Bai so that she couldn't easily escape from the plane. Under its interference, although it failed, but it was still a stroke of luck, and Wei Bai's application was approved. The system saw that it knew nothing about the running host, and silently guarded the secret. Wei sneered, "Humph, torturing the heart, my strong point, If I don't torture that Shui pervert with a sissy name until he cries for his father and calls for his mother, it won't be over." No trace of snow in this plane was sick, so she didn't feel bad about torturing him. Just as she set the flag, she suddenly lost her footing. Then he rolled down the cliff. The system immediately said, "Activate minimum life guarantee." Wei Bai rolled into a pile of weeds in a daze under the protection of a life subsistence guarantee. She was not hurt at all, but she suddenly felt a chill on her back. She raised her head in a daze and saw the sky full of rain. A man in a white robe appeared. He held a bamboo umbrella and walked gracefully across the uneven ground. Miraculously, his shoes were not stained by a trace of water vapor, leaving no trace on the water, the pinnacle of Qigong. His black hair was tied up with a light-colored ribbon. His black eyes were filled with gentleness. His robes fluttered in the wind, making him look like a celestial being. He seemed to have sensed that there was someone in the weeds. He turned his head and stared at Wei Bai. Wei Bai held her breath, not daring to move. That person smiled. His peerlessly handsome face was alluring because of this smile. Wei Bai opened her eyes wide and looked at him without moving. The man seemed to know that he had achieved his goal. He turned around and walked away, but his footsteps were slow, as if he was waiting for something. Wei Bai did as he wished and immediately rushed out of the weeds. Then, she quickly ran to the front and knelt on the ground. Her pair of childish, incomparably innocent eyes stared at him. "Celestial, please accept me." The man seemed to be stunned. Then, he lowered his eyes. His voice was as gentle as a clear spring. "You are. Fast Transmigration System. Adonis, come here. /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu. Download Transmigration System. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. The next time you open the bookshelf, you will be able to see it. Chapter 1270. Wei Bai's entire body was trembling. Her clothes were tattered and her entire body was covered in blood. Her tears fell. "My family was killed by a devil. I want to take revenge. Your martial arts are so high. Can you accept me as your disciple?" She was like a pitiful young bird that was cruelly pushed out of her stable nest. She fell into the dust, her body covered in wounds. She was so cute that people wanted to destroy her. She saw the man's peak Qigong. She knew that he could help her take revenge. "Who killed your family?" The man's voice carried a trace of coldness, as if seeing her in such a sorry state made him empathize with her. The gentleness on his face turned into a righteous majesty. Wei Bai's lips trembled. She hugged her chest with both hands, but her clothes continued to fall. Her round and beautiful shoulders were mercilessly destroyed by the rain. Her pitiful and innocent eyes under her eyelashes were filled with gorgeous hatred. "It's the devil's sex leader." The man frowned. A trace of sorrow flashed across his face. Then he said, "I'll find a place for you to stay. As for the devil's sex leader, I'll capture him and bring him to justice. There's no need to acknowledge me as your master. Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. She seemed to be at a loss. It seemed that stopping him and kneeling down to acknowledge him as her master had already used up all of her courage. Seeing that the man was about to leave, Wei Wei Bai suddenly stood up. She reached out and pulled on his robes, her wet eyes pleading. I want to take revenge myself. Please accept me. The man's handsome brows wrinkled. No, revenge is not suitable for you. I'd better. His words came to a halt, a trace of twisted excitement exploding in his gentle eyes. Wei Wei Bai released her hand. Her clothes all fell to the ground. The blood lotus on her shoulder was enchanting. Her pure white body, in the rain, had a kind of beauty that could captivate one's soul. But her face was filled with desperation and madness. Blood stained her cheeks, setting off the gorgeous light of hatred in her eyes. She was so beautiful that it could drive people crazy. If I can't become your disciple, then please let me become your woman. Only he could take revenge, even if he had to sacrifice his own body. The man's breathing became heavier, and it took him a lot of effort to suppress the darkness in his eyes. He leaned over and placed the umbrella over her head. Then, he took off his white robe with one hand and gently draped it over her body. There was a faint orchid fragrance on her clothes. He was very much like the gentleman he was. You don't have to be like this. I'll accept you as my disciple. The man's voice was filled with compassion. Wei Wei Bai raised her head in surprise. There was pure worship and adoration on her beautiful face. Direct and fearless emotions appeared on Wei Wei Bai's face without any concealment. The man said gently, I am no trace of snow. You will follow me from now on. I will teach you swordsmanship so that you can take revenge. Wei Wei Bai stared at him with a burning passion in her eyes. She grabbed the corner of his clothes tightly, as if she had seen her savior. Master. No trace of Snow's lips curled up, revealing a gentle and gratified smile. His entire temperament was pure and holy. This feeling of being wholeheartedly trusted was really good. When he obtained all of her trust and adoration, he would personally betray her and shatter all of her hopes. It must be very delicious. Without the notification of the favorability level, Wei Wei Bai could only make a simple judgment of no trace of Snow's feelings. You should be excited, crazy, perverted, mentally twisted, and shameless. She silently ridiculed him. Then, like a chick seeing her partner for the first time, she worshipped him like a parent. Wei Wei Bai felt that no trace of Snow liked to play with people's hearts. She trusted and worshipped him so that he would put his thoughts on her and slowly think about the future. No trace of Snow suddenly reached out and held her bloodied hand. His gentle palm had a comforting gentleness. He turned around and pulled her into his embrace. Wei Wei Bai was startled and looked up with some fear. No trace of Snow only gently placed his hand on her shoulder, pressing the lotus under his palm. A wave of warmth entered her body, warming her up immediately. Wei Wei Bai's eyes showed gratitude. She was a little embarrassed. Thank you, benefactor. No trace of Snow's smile deepened. He said gently, It's time to call me master. In the future, you will follow me. Wei Wei Bai nervously lowered her head, as if she was a little helpless and shy. Then, she softly nodded. She didn't seem to notice that no trace of Snow's gaze was cold and interesting as he looked at her. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head. Her gaze was just as cold. She was just short of rolling her eyes. //. Chapter 1271. The Devil Sect was destroyed, and the leader of the Devil Sect was missing. Those righteous people of the martial arts world originally came to take revenge, but they saw the Devil's Sect being destroyed. It was really satisfying. Only a bright magnolia was left at the scene, and it was a symbol of a certain person. It was said that the man always wore a black mask with a magnolia pattern on it. He was almost invincible with his long sword. No one knew where he came from. No one knew when he disappeared. No one even knew his name. Because he always left magnolia flowers at the scene of a crime, everyone gave him the nickname of White Magnolia. In the martial arts ranking list, he and the leader of the martial arts world, No Trace of Snow, were both ranked first. His character was incomparably evil, both good and evil, and it all depended on his mood. Sometimes he could destroy a group of bad guys, and sometimes he would run to kill the righteous people of the martial arts world. He did everything according to his mood. So the people of the martial arts world did not see him as a righteous person, but as a member of the devil's sect. So even if the devil's sect was destroyed, those righteous people would not be happy. Instead, it would add another mark to his sinful book. Wei Wei Bai casually counted the poison needles, listening to the system's lively Jianghu gossip. That damned masked magnolia. Wasn't he the leader of the martial arts world? No trace of snow? His name was already Sissy enough, but even his nickname was Sissy. Wei Wei Bai sat barefooted by the window, 1 foot outside the window. Outside the window was a garden, and her toes even touched the blooming Chinese roses. The silver bell on her ankle jingled. Suddenly, she seemed to have noticed something and immediately looked up happily. At the end of the flowers, a slender moon-white figure slowly appeared. His black hair was tied into a neat bun with a jade hairpin, and his fair and handsome face had a distinct cold arrogance, but his deep dark eyes were soft and affectionate. It was as if he was looking at everyone, as if he was looking at the person he loved. Wei Wei Bai threw away the poison needle in her hand and jumped out of the window. She stepped on those Chinese roses. It didn't matter if the soles of her feet were pricked by thorns. Her eyes were full of pure worship and admiration. She rushed in front of no trace of snow and smiled brightly. "Master, I already know how to hide needles." No trace of snow lowered his head and saw that her childlike eyes were filled with his shadow. Her thick black hair casually draped over her back, fluttering as she lightly ran. He was like a child who didn't understand the evils of the world. This kind of person should be especially desperate when betrayed. No trace of snow revealed a trace of a gentle smile, as if he was looking at his most precious child. He reached out his hand and gently brushed aside the loose strands of hair by her cheek. Wei Wei is very powerful. When Master was your age, he didn't know anything. Wei Wei Bai, when you were my age, didn't you already learn how to kill and destroy the evidence? Don't make yourself sound so pure and innocent, you psychopathic murderer. She was spitting at him in her heart, but her face was full of bashfulness. How can I compare to Master? Master, look, she suddenly pointed behind him. Shui Wuhan was caught off guard and looked back. As a result, a cold needle suddenly pierced into his neck. His hand, as if it had eyes, caught the needle that attacked her and snatched it away with force. Then he calmly turned back, his smile unchanged. Still thinking of sneaking up on Master? Wei Wei Bai bit her lip with a face of annoyance. Her pale lips were bitten into a bright red color, and she glared at him, seemingly annoyed and annoyed. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. / transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system. Prince Charming, come here. Next time you open the bookshelf, you will see it. Chapter 1272. She seemed to feel embarrassed that she had been exposed. No trace of snow reached out and passed the needle to her. You didn't put poison in it? Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and snatched the needle. Her beautiful eyes glanced at him coquettishly. Who knows how to put poison in it? You're my master. I'll poison anyone but you. Her face was filled with all kinds of emotions. If she liked him, she liked him. If she was dissatisfied, she was dissatisfied. Her admiration for him was obvious, but she was also very adorable. No trace of Snow's eyes darkened, and he smiled. I'm doing this for your own good. Your needle should be dipped in poison at all times. Jianghu people are sinister. You don't have a foundation in martial arts. I won't be able to teach you advanced martial arts or sword techniques in time. I can only teach you poison and concealed weapons to protect yourself. Bai Weiwei pouted in dissatisfaction. She crossed her arms behind her back, slightly tilted her face, and stared at him with a pair of clear eyes. Master, her voice was soft and coquettish. I'll never use poison against you, Master. And I still hope that you can teach me sword techniques. I want to be as good as you in the future. No trace of Snow's smile became softer. His tone was kind. Once you learn how to use poison needles, you'll be as good as me in the future. Wei Wei Bai snorted. You only know how to brush me off. When can I get my revenge? After saying that, she turned around and left. Her long skirt fluttered with her movements. Her every move was so lively and full of life. No trace of Snow looked at her indifferently, but she suddenly stopped in her tracks, as if she was hesitating about something. It was as if she was thinking of some evil idea. Then he saw her tilt her face and reveal a sly smile. She took a step forward and deliberately fell to the ground. Ouch! She shouted exaggeratedly. It hurts. The system was expressionless. Host, your acting skills have regressed 10,000 times. Wei Wei Bai said, That's exactly what I want. You have to deliberately let others see through your acting. No trace of Snow, that pervert, liked her pure and unpretentious nature, as well as her actions to monopolize his line of sight. The more she cared about him, the happier he was. Fuck off. Sure enough, he saw her fall in such an exaggerated manner, as well as her obviously deceptive groans of pain. No trace of Snow sighed helplessly. His footsteps were as graceful as flowing water as he arrived in front of her. He had already reached out to pull her up. However, Wei Wei Bai raised her eyes. Her eyes were round, but the ends of her eyes were long and narrow, making her look even more charming. She smiled triumphantly, and her voice softened. Master, it hurts. No trace of Snow's hand gently tugged at her wrist, and just as he was about to use his strength to pull her up. However, when he heard her words, he only paused and lowered his eyes to look at her. His expression was still gentle and affectionate, but there was a dark light in the depths of his eyes. He said softly, Where does it hurt? I don't think you fell hard. Wei Wei Bai was not embarrassed at all for being exposed. Instead, she tilted her head and smiled charmingly. Then, she raised her leg. Her beautiful calves were exposed, and the gauzy dress slid down to her knees as she raised her leg. Her pink toes were stained with some dust, which made them look even more white and tender. Her calves were as delicate and smooth as jade, and there were a few rose thorns on the soles of her feet. A little drop of blood came out from the thorns, and it was so gorgeous that it burned people's eyes. Wei Wei Bai's eyebrows hid a gorgeous beauty. She seemed innocent, but also seemed to be doing it on purpose. Chapter 1273. Her delicate toes lightly tapped no trace of Snow's chest. The blood on her feet stained his moon-white robe a little red. It was eye-catching and stunning. The bells on her ankles were ringing seductively. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her fingers. Her posture was languid and seductive. She curled her ink-black hair in a seductive manner. Master, do you think I'm seriously injured? She was supposed to be innocent, but in the blink of an eye, she turned into a seductive beauty. No trace of Snow froze for a moment. Then, he suddenly reached out and picked her up. He gracefully leaped onto the window. Then, he stepped into the house. He put Wei Wei Bai on the table. Then, he stretched out his fingers, held her feet, and quickly pulled out her rose thorns. Then, he took out a bottle of medicine from his sleeve and sprinkled some on her. His every move was so calm and gentle, but didn't give people any fanciful thoughts. He was a true gentleman. Even his expression was as if he was looking at his daughter. He completely ignored Wei Wei Bai's seductive posture. The seductive look on Wei Wei Bai's face disappeared. It was replaced by annoyance and anger. She lifted her feet, but no trace of Snow held her down. Okay, don't always lift your skirt. Didn't the adults teach you that it's easy to catch a cold? Although his expression was calm, his tone was still a little hesitant. It seemed that he was a little embarrassed to say this to her. Wei Wei Bai smiled. Master, you're so good to me. She relied wholeheartedly and seduced him faintly. Sometimes she was as innocent and childish as a child. Sometimes she was like a seductive spirit. Her every move was seductive. No trace of Snow accepted her at first only because of the flower on her shoulder. But after getting along with her for a short period of time, he found that she simply gave him a big surprise. In the past, he had met many interesting people, but after getting along for a long time, it became boring. Only Wei Wei Bai was different every day, giving him a huge sense of novelty. Seriously, it made him look forward to her relying on him as she grew up. When she was at her best, he would then feel the pain of destroying her. Wei Wei Bai noticed that his fingers were trembling, although it was only for a moment. However, she knew that this pervert was having another intracranial orgasm. Wei Wei Bai lazily lowered her eyes, but her tone was filled with cute expectation. "Master, can you show me how to use your sword? Look at how I learned how to hide needles in just 3 days, and I even finished reading the hidden weapon manual you gave me. I worked so hard. You have to reward me." No Trace of Snow released her foot and said in a helpless tone, "You only know how to torment your master." Wei Wei Bai's face was a little blushed, but she acted like a little girl. "I like the way Master holds the sword. Even if I can't learn it, it's good to be able to see it." No Trace of Snow sighed. "Once you're done watching, learn how to use concealed weapons properly, all right?" Wei Wei Bai jumped off the table and immediately took a sword from the wall. No Trace of Snow's sword was in her room. She was afraid that he would regret it when he went back to get it, so she gave him an ordinary sword. No Trace of Snow was not picky, and his every move showed that he was a good master who doted on his disciple. He walked out of the door and came to the door, but Wei Wei Bai had already excitedly ran to the window. She supported her chin with both hands and leaned against the window, eagerly looking at him. No Trace of Snow's soft and affectionate expression disappeared, and his white robe suddenly flew up. The sword in his hand flew out of the scabbard, and his slender fingers grasped the sword hilt like lightning, and a cold, killing intent emerged from the sword. Fast address of the full text. https://www.sashu.com//fast. Chapter 1274. Then I'll go learn the secret weapon book, Master. Without waiting for No Trace of Snow to respond, she immediately reached out and closed the window. Outside the window, the loving smile on No Trace of Snow's face slowly disappeared. He coldly raised his hand and wiped his cheeks. There was a familiar fragrance in his nose, which was left on him by Wei Wei Bai. No Trace of Snow frowned slightly. He pursed his thin lips as if he was thinking about something. Suddenly, he turned around and left. But Wei Wei Bai was nagging the system in the room. "Without the favorability notification, I didn't even know the effect just now." Her current personality was normal, naive and childish, a vicious and scheming girl. Shui Wuhan must have known that she had grown up in the demonic sect since she was a child. No matter how naive she would definitely be cruel and unscrupulous. The original owner was definitely not a good person. Wei Wei Bai was just continuing the original owner's character. However, she didn't know if the original owner was seductive or not. Anyway, she had made up her mind to seduce No Trace of Snow until he knelt down and called her Baba. The system said, "It's okay. When the favorability reaches 0, it will automatically remind you." Wei Wei Bai said, "Is it still negative now?" The system said, "Don't try to trick me. Rules are rules. I can't tell you what the favorability is." Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. "Trick my ass. There's no notification for the favorability, so No Trace of Snow's favorability is negative." Was there a need to tell it? Wei Wei Bai looked at the secret weapon book again. She needed strength to seduce people. Wait until she became a martial arts genius. So he hung Shui Wuhan up like a river crab. Who asked him to be a pervert? Who asked him to be sick? This kind of person deserved a beating. After the system knew Wei Wei Bai's thoughts, it only had one comment. He could dream even better. After all, he didn't need money to dream. This was because the male lead of this world had an abnormally high martial strength. He was simply the number one in this world and could not be shaken. Wei Wei Bai ate and played happily. While she was at it, she played pranks on the servants, causing them to be in chaos. She portrayed a mischievous little cutie in a vivid manner. As for No Trace of Snow, ever since that kiss, he had been in a hurry to see her. When he came in the morning, he finally stayed a little longer. He said that he would help her investigate the culprit behind the massacre of her family. A trace of fear flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. It seemed that she didn't want no trace of Snow to investigate. However, no trace of Snow seemed to be thick-skinned and did not notice her expression at all. Instead, it seemed more like a malicious intent. He began to interrogate her about her background. Wei Wei Bai awkwardly avoided this question and fled. When she was running away, a dark malice finally appeared on no trace of Snow's face. Was she so afraid of him knowing her true colors? Wei Wei Bai had a strange look on her face. She touched her face and thought, "What do you think of my acting? A pitiful little girl who is afraid of being found out about her demon sect identity? System, I think you're more like the villain. Wei Wei Bai, you don't understand my beauty. It's okay. No trace of Snow will soon appreciate my beauty." She only had 8 months left. She didn't have the time to play a master's affectionate game with no trace of Snow. She had to do something more intense. Otherwise, how could she gain heart points? The more she was afraid of something, the more no trace of Snow would do. For example, he would investigate her identity as a member of the demon sect and accuse her with a sorrowful face. He would break off their master-disciple relationship. This was a good thing. She would make some accidents when the time came. She would see if she could gain some heart points. / comma. Chapter 1275. No trace of Snow's expression changed, but he followed her strength and grabbed her wrist. He snatched the poison needles from her hand and threw her back onto the bed. Wei Wei Bai hit the bed, feeling a little dizzy. She looked up and saw Shui Wuhan holding a few poisonous needles in his hand. He looked down at them and then laughed softly. "You're so cute. You don't have any martial arts skills. You want to kill me with the agility of an ordinary person. You're so bold and stupid." Wei Wei Bai's expression did not change. Instead, she smiled. She was not as obedient as she was in front of her master. Her body was enchanting, and she was lying on her side in a seductive posture. She supported her forehead with her hand and said casually, "Who said I want to kill you? I don't know where Big Brother is, but your martial arts skills are really good. This little girl admires you." No trace of Snow looked up and saw the charm in her every move. Was this the saintess of the demonic sect who was groomed to be the next saintess? Thinking about what the saintess of the demonic sect was for, he did not know where a surge of irritation came from. Most of the saintesses of the demonic sect did not know martial arts, but they were proficient in the art of seduction. They basically made a living by seducing men. The more dissatisfied he was, the gentler his tone became. "Why are you so inquisitive about my identity? Do you want to repay me with your body?" Wei Wei Bai's long and beautiful eyes faintly glanced at him. A few traces of coldness flashed in her eyes, but her smile was charming. "Okay, if you are better than my master, then I will worship you as my master." Or, her voice was a little hoarse, deliberately evoking a man's deepest desire. She said slowly, word by word, "It's good to be your woman." She looked like a complete seductress. But the masked man in front of her could not help but laugh. His smile was indescribably cold. "Oh, if you worship me as your master, then what about your master?" Wei Wei Bai seemed a little perplexed. She frowned and actually looked a little pitiful. "That's true. My master is very good to me. I'm a little embarrassed to kick him away." "Then I will be your woman." This answer was even more infuriating than before. She was not reserved like a woman and had no morals. In front of him, she even knew how to pretend to be obedient. If he did not come here wearing a mask, he would not know that she was actually so unrestrained. His woman. Did she really know what it meant? Bai Weiwei simply felt that it wasn't enough to add oil to the fire. She stretched out her finger, picked up a strand of long hair, and lazily twirled it around. She was charming and seductive at the same time. "I know everything. I've seen all kinds of positions for men and women. I know how to make men happy." System, the host was no longer a little white flower and had become a little demoness. He was not used to it. Shui Wuhan stood in the dark. His expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the mask on his face. Only his thin lips were excessively red, which gave him a kind of devilish charm. Calm. Before Bai Weiwei could react, he had already appeared at the bedside. Then his tall and slender body slowly bent over. He extended a white, jade-like finger and placed it on her toggle. How do you want to be happy? Spring is short. Why don't you let me experience it now? Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of dark trembling. It seemed like fear, but she quickly suppressed it and took the initiative to reach out and grab the corner of his clothes. She smiled sweetly. Her thick eyelashes trembled, and her pink face was tinged with a faint blush. Chapter 1276. When No Trace of Snow heard this, he laughed instead of being angry. In the blink of an eye, he had already clasped his hands on her shoulders and felt her body tremble. What a cute reaction. She was so scared, yet she still tried so hard to seduce him. Wei Wei Bai bit her lip. Her breathing became chaotic. She hugged the blanket tightly, the fear in her eyes exposed. Don't come over. I won't let you go. No Trace of Snow's voice rose slightly, his tone indescribably evil. Tear my mouth, then you won't be able to kiss me. She was so angry that her face turned red. She gritted her teeth and scolded, You shameless, ugly freak, wearing a mask all day long. Your face must have been covered up long ago. No wonder you don't dare to meet people. You're a rapist in the middle of the night because no woman likes you, so your heart is bitter. You can only be a pervert. Those seductive gestures just now, they were all gone. She was just short of putting her hands on her hips and turning into an explosive little shrew. Her voice was as pleasant as a bell, but her scolding could destroy one's heart and lungs. She really had so many expressions. How could she change so many expressions? No Trace of Snow's smile deepened. It was as if he was looking at an insensible child throwing a tantrum, completely unconcerned. Wei Wei Bai was tired of scolding. Seeing the other party's indifferent expression, she bit her lip in frustration and glared at him in dissatisfaction. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes, and a mischievous malice appeared in her eyes. No Trace of Snow was already on guard, and could even easily seal her acupoints to restrain her. But to see how many flowers she could come up with, he let her jump around. She suddenly stretched out her hands, and the blanket slid off her body. Her clothes were mostly open, revealing the tender red belly band and snow-white neck. Her skin was so beautiful that it was shining. Shui Wuhan glanced at her. Then she had already pounced over. Her soft body carried the unique, clean fragrance of a young girl. She directly crashed into his arms. No Trace of Snow suddenly wanted to retreat, thinking that she was going to attack him again. But he suddenly froze. Her lips actually pressed against his thin lips. Her fragrant breath wrapped around him, as if even his soul could be seduced away by her. Her movements were jerky and passionate as she recklessly barged into his mouth. No Trace of Snow had never encountered such an unexpected attack before. He was even dazed for a moment and didn't know how to react. And this moment of absent-mindedness gave her an opportunity. No Trace of Snow felt a pain in his mouth. His eyes suddenly became clear, and he raised his hand to slap Wei Wei Bai on the top of her head. They were going to film it well. She must be dead. Wei Wei Bai was not a pushover either. She had long been prepared for his counterattack. Relying on her soft body, she directly leaned back, hooked her feet on the blanket, and threw it at his face. No Trace of Snow's mouth was bleeding, and the tip of his tongue was entangled with the needle that she had used to attack him. He did not allow her to insert the needle deep into his throat. If he hadn't rolled it up in time, his throat was probably crushed by the needles. It was really impossible to guard against. How long had it been since he had suffered such an unexpected injury? She didn't even know martial arts. Just by relying on her soft body, without any internal strength, she was actually able to avoid his actions. No Trace of Snow tasted the blood in his mouth. It was not poisonous. He pulled open the blanket, but he saw that Wei Wei Bai was still buttoning her clothes and looking at him with a very happy smile. You're poisoned. I want you to listen to me in the future. She smiled like a little fox that had succeeded, and her beautiful eyes were full of pride. No Trace of Snow reached out his finger and gently touched the blood at the corner of his mouth. His cold eyes had a few traces of a twisted smile. Then he said unhurriedly, What do you want me to listen to you? The download address is at https://www.sashu.com, the comma. Chapter 1277. There was still a needle wound in his mouth. If the needle was poisoned, she did not care to bite him. She did not want to expose herself. Did she want to tell others that she was a liar? Smart and naive. Vicious and bad in a frank way. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be trying to open her eyes. Her eyelashes were trembling, but she could not speak. No trace of snow put her back on the bed. He smiled before she fainted. I'll keep your identity, so no trace of snow won't know who you are, but you'll have to call me master in the future. Is this a deal? Wei Wei Bai's breathing gradually stabilized. She had completely fainted. No trace of snow pulled the blanket over and covered her. He took off the mask on his face and looked at Wei Wei Bai with a smile. He looked at her for a while, and his tone became casual. I wonder what kind of expression you'll have when you find out that your master is a hypocrite. I'm looking forward to it. He was looking forward to the day she broke down. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she felt comfortable all over. She said, "Did the favorability increase, Tongzi?" The system said, "Don't try to trick me. I won't say anything." Wei Wei Bai, who failed to trick the system, did not look ashamed at all. She said, "Where's Sissy Snow?" The system said, "Other than the name Sissy, there's nothing sissy about him." It turned to look at the male lead and said, "He pretended to come from outside." Wei Wei Bai nodded thoughtfully. She said, "The favorability increase is not ideal. It's still not 0. Negative favorability would only sound when it was 0, 50, and 100. Until now, she had not received a single notification. Shui Wuhin was really a black-hearted rotten stone that was hard to chew. How could someone be so perverted? Wei Wei Bai yawned, then got up and took out the book on concealed weapons and the needles. Then, without even combing her hair or wearing her shoes, she smashed the room. After she was done, she sat on the table barefooted. She took the needle and threw it at the begonia beside the bed. It was as if he had a grudge against someone. Her face was frosty and her eyes were ruthless. Her eyes were red and filled with grievance. When no trace of snow walked in, he saw that one of the girl's feet was dangling under the table. Her snow-white ankles were adorned with bells that jingled as she moved. Her dress was in a mess, and her long hair hung down to her waist. She held a needle in her hand and stabbed it into the flower. Her bright and tender face was innocently tinged with vicious resentment. No trace of snow deliberately stepped heavily on the ground. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned around, unable to retract the ruthlessness on her face. Instinctively, she threw the needle in her hand at him. No trace of snow calmly raised his hand and caught the needle she threw at him. He frowned. "What's wrong, Wei Wei?" When Wei Wei Bai saw that it was no trace of snow, panic flashed across her face. The ruthlessness in her eyes was replaced by uneasiness. Then, she immediately revealed a brilliant smile and pretended to be innocent and tender. "Master, you're back. I missed you so much." With that, she jumped off the table and the bells rang. She shouldn't have messed up the room. She directly rushed in front of no trace of snow and said with a smile, "Master, did you bring me something good again?" No trace of snow looked at her and found that she couldn't even put on her clothes properly. He lovingly and gently reached out to straighten her clothes, looking like a father looking at his daughter. "What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood? Who bullied my little disciple?" Chapter 1278. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have thought of something, and a trace of twisted hatred flashed through her eyes. But very quickly, she hid it away, leaving behind only innocence. She complained unhappily, "Isn't it because Master has been too cold recently? Is it because he saw me running around and regretted taking me in as a disciple?" No trace of snow said helplessly, "Aren't I investigating the massacre of your family?" Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened, and her face turned pale. She forced a smile. "Really? Then what did you find out?" No trace of snow saw that she was clenching her hands tightly, and her palms were probably sweating from nervousness. There was a moment of joy in his smile, but of course, it was replaced by a doting and gentle smile. "I found out that the demon sect was destroyed." Her breath stopped, and her fingers began to tremble. No trace of snow paused, and then said slowly, "Your family happened to be near the demon sect, So the murderer destroyed your family, and you were the only one who escaped. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment, and seemed to be a loss. Family near the demon's sect, what was that? She was clearly from the demon's sect. Suddenly, she remembered what the man said to her last night. If she called him master, he would help her keep the secret. Wei Wei Bai's expression was complicated. She wanted to tell others about her obvious acting skills. She was very conflicted, very uncomfortable, and very secretive. The host did not want to comment on her aggressive acting skills. After Wei Wei Bai finished playing the role of a conflicted disciple, she received a perverted look of happiness from No Trace of Snow, and then she retracted her expression in satisfaction. Then she quietly heaved a sigh of relief and reluctantly showed a sad expression. Yes, my family was killed by that demon. I only know that he was wearing a mask, and he wanted to kill me. These words made her truly fearful for a moment. No Trace of Snow reached out and patted her shoulder, as if to comfort her. It's okay. I've already found out who he is. Wei Wei Bai suddenly showed a sinister expression. Who is it? This expression was too obvious. No Trace of Snow pretended not to see it, but he knew that she really wanted revenge. The saintess of the demonic sect was her mother, and her father was one of the guardians of the demonic sect. She grew up in the demonic sect and treated it as her home. Coupled with the education she had received since young, she had developed the vicious nature of the devil sect. Revenge for the smallest grievance, revenge for all enmity. No Trace of Snow sighed. It's the white magnolia. What a D*MN nickname. Wei Wei Bai resisted the urge to complain. Her expression was a little strange. No Trace of Snow thought she was sad and comforted her. I will avenge you. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said loudly. I want to report it myself. I must catch that white magnolia, and then thousands of cuts, all kinds of torture. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she did not say it out loud. It was as if she was afraid of scaring No Trace of Snow. No Trace of Snow looked innocent and calm, as if he did not know what she was going to say next. His expression was gentle, and his white robe was holy and elegant. He looked like a savior as he said to her, It's okay. Master will help you. Wei Wei Bai looked up. The gratitude and infatuation in her eyes were obvious. Her voice trembled. Master, will you always be so good to me? No Trace of Snow said, What are you thinking? As long as you are my disciple, I will be good to you. Wei Wei Bai's eyes reddened. She reached out and threw herself into his arms, crying out loud. Master, you must not abandon me. No Trace of Snow reached out and stroked her back, comforting her. What are you worrying about at such a young age? How could Master abandon you? Master is still waiting for you to show your beautiful face of breaking down in pain. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She grabbed the clothes on his back tightly, as if she was holding a treasure. She buried her head in his chest, her voice full of fierceness. Master promised, You are not allowed to abandon me. If you break your promise, I will lock Master up. She fiercely threatened. She was like a child who did not know how to be possessive. But this possessive desire made No Trace of Snow stare, and then his smile deepened. A sense of joy that he had never felt before, and a sense of novelty surged up. In Wei Wei Bai heard a voice that she had not heard in a long time. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 0. Wei Wei Bai, I never thought that Master would be such a pervert, actually liking captivity play. Transmigration system. Male God, come here. Download the https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Male God, come here. Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system. Male God, come here. Download the full article. https://www.sashu.com transmigration system. Male God, come here. Download the full article. https://m sashu.com transmigration system. Male God, come here. Chapter 1279. Wei Wei Bai was tired from crying, and she did not sleep well last night. She cried and cried until she fell asleep in No Trace of Snow's arms. Shui Wuhan was a perverted man, but he was actually a gentleman. He would never do anything to her. That was why Wei Wei Bai hugged him calmly, rubbing against his chest as she slept peacefully. Then, the system saw a scene that stung its eyes. No Trace of Snow lowered his eyes, his gaze dark and strange. His snow-white finger gently rubbed against her lips. There was even a trace of her tears on his lips. The slightly cold moisture made him silent for a while. Then he slowly put his finger in his mouth. The system was secretly eating the bread. No Trace of Snow's face softened, and he laughed softly. What a cute child. That eerie tone made it feel like it had entered some strange and dark hell, with a chilly wind blowing. The system trembled and hurriedly ate 2 more bread to calm itself down. This crazy male lead, this poisonous host. The system once again felt like it was a clear stream between them. Wei Wei Bai ate and slept well, and the speed at which she learned poison needles was like a rocket. That was because she bought the hidden weapon talent. The cheapest one was 10 days of life. After all, she needed to maintain the image of a talented little demoness, and not a silly little cutie. How could she not even learn poison needles and hidden weapons? Wouldn't that be a violation of her image? To Wei Wei Bai, a violation of her image was unbearable. She felt like she had an obsessive-compulsive disorder set up by someone. Either she did not act, or she would leap to the top of the world. She was such a perfect little fairy. Don't worship her too much. Wei Wei Bai looked sad. I'm still too good. The system. Wei Wei Bai. Actually, I still prefer the image of a silly little white flower. The system said, your hobbies are really unique. Wei Wei Bai. The little white flower doesn't know anything and everyone is used to it. That's why the little white flower persona saves money. The system thought about it and felt that it made sense. At least, little white flower didn't need to buy talent goods. Wei Wei Bai was casually chatting with the system while she flipped her wrist and moved her feet. She was practicing her concealed weapon martial arts. No Trace of Snow was a freak, but his persona was just as perfect as hers. He was the leader of Wulin's alliance with 0 negative reviews, and he was the pride of God who was the best in martial arts in the game. Bright as the moon, floating in the air like an immortal. No matter what, everyone would think that he was the righteous one, except for the fact that he was too good at pretending. His righteous face really took advantage of him. One had to know that people were all superficial, and no one in the ancient and modern times could escape this terrible curse. When they saw someone with good looks, they couldn't help but become a bootlicker. The system suddenly said, the male lead is here. Wei Wei Bai immediately straightened her expression and instantly changed her proper, but not aesthetically pleasing posture. She flipped her wrist enchantingly, but the expression on her face was still that of naivety. Her dress swayed like lotus petals, but the poisonous needle on her finger was sharp and insidious. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind the flowers, and the poisonous needle flew into his eye socket. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She rushed forward, pulled her satin belt from her waist, and threw it fiercely, wanting to wrap around her poisonous needle. But it was too late. She wasn't fast enough and couldn't touch it. That figure, however, gently caught the poison needle between his fingers. He was not affected by this unexpected attack at all. Chapter 1280. Wei Wei Bai looked at the person who had pinched the needle. He was wearing a bright white robe, and his feet were not stained with any dew. He smiled warmly. Wei Wei, you've improved again. It was Shui Wuhan. His eyes were half closed, and the light in his eyes was clear, revealing a different kind of concentration. Wei Wei Bai had long seen him. Her breathing became a bit erratic, and her face flushed red. Finally, she angrily stomped her feet and fiercely rushed in front of No Trace of Snow. Master, next time you're not allowed to run in front of me without a sound. Do you know how dangerous it is? No Trace of Snow said somewhat innocently in a gentle voice, Master won't be hurt. You don't have to be so worried. Wei Wei Bai fiercely rolled her eyes at him, the bell on her ankle breaking. Just like her bright and beautiful face, it was filled with a sense of irritable freshness. In any case, you're not allowed to be like this. Do you know how worried I was when I saw you? No trace of snow seemed to be indifferent. Why? If it was someone else, wouldn't you be worried? Wei Wei Bai was momentarily distracted and coldly snorted. Who cares how other people die? I only care about you. After saying this, she bit her lip hard and looked at him in a panic. It was as if she was afraid that he would find out about her vicious nature. However, no trace of snow acted as if he did not hear her. He handed the poison needle to Wei Wei Bai. All right, don't be angry. Master won't do it again. Wei Wei Bai sighed in relief and hurriedly took the poison needle. Then, she tried to change the topic. Master, have you found out the whereabouts of that white magnolia? No trace of Snow's eyes darkened as he said faintly. There are some clues. The two people who came today said that they had seen the white magnolia. That's why I asked you to come with me to take a look. Wei Wei Bai's eyes immediately lit up. She rushed in front of him and tugged at his sleeve. Master, quickly take me to see her. That Bai Yulan has committed a heinous crime. I must capture her with my own hands and then hand her over to Master so that Master can kill her. No trace of Snow seemed a little surprised. What? You didn't kill him yourself? Wei Wei Bai snorted. Of course I'm just being kind. Although we have to take revenge, isn't Master the Wulin Alliance leader? She raised her head, her bright eyes filled with unconcealed admiration and love. Isn't the Wulin Alliance leader supposed to eradicate evil? If I help Master catch the bad guys, everyone will praise Master. She thought of him with all her heart. There wasn't a trace of impurity in her feelings. They burned brighter than the brightest flame. No trace of Snow stared blankly at her. His gaze seemed a little strange, but he quickly covered it up. Then he laughed softly and said, Then I'll wait for Wei Wei to catch the bad guys for Master. Wei Wei Bai smiled brightly. Okay, Master. But soon, she couldn't smile anymore. The guests were in the front hall. As soon as they entered, a light green figure floated over like a fairy. Wu Hen, have you thought it through? No trace of Snow's smile didn't change. Ziqing, I haven't thought about it yet. It's not easy to answer. Lin Ziqing's expression didn't change. Her cold and beautiful face was so beautiful that it stood out from the rest of the world. Wei Wei Bai curiously popped her head out from behind No Trace of Snow. She smiled and said, Master, what are you talking about? Lin Ziqing was stunned when she saw Wei Wei Bai, including the man sitting behind Lin Ziqing. The girl in front of them had an exquisite face shape, eyes, hair, and figure. She was born with a charming charm. Her skin was fair and flawless. Her bright red lips were bright and alluring. Chapter 1281. She was wearing a peach-red dress, which was a bright color, but she actually wore it brightly. And her smile had a trace of malice, without a trace of decent dignity. Wei Wei Bai saw that they were stunned and frowned in dissatisfaction. She reached out her hand and hooked a strand of her hair that was hanging down, lazily twirling it, with a trace of coldness in her eyes. What's wrong? Are you all blockheads? You don't even speak when you see people. Lin Ziqing reacted. So this must be Miss Bai? Is she your new disciple? Not waiting for No Trace of Snow to answer, Wei Wei Bai said with a faint smile. What, Miss Bai? I'm not used to hearing it. Granny, you should just call me Little Wei Wei. Lin Ziqing and the man sitting there almost spat out a mouthful of tea. No Trace of Snow seemed a little helpless. He faintly said, Wei Wei, she's only 2 years older than you. How can you call her Granny? Wei Wei Bai immediately changed her words, older sister. Lin Ziqing's expression became even worse. Which woman didn't care about age, even if there was a difference of 2 years? No Trace of Snow seemed to be afraid that the situation would become even more awkward. He immediately said, Sit down. Business is more important. Then he walked away to instruct the servant to bring more tea and snacks. But Wei Wei Bai lazily walked towards the table when she passed by Lin Ziqing. The corners of her long and narrow eyes slightly raised, and the vicious coldness in her eyes was clearly visible. Stay away from my master, slut. Her voice was soft and sweet, but she said the most vicious words. No Trace of Snow, who was talking to the servant, heard it. He didn't say anything, but the corner of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a trace of evil smile. Lin Ziqing was so angry that his face turned white, but it wasn't good for him to immediately flare up. Wei Wei Bai ran to the table and looked at the man with some disdain. Then she directly sat down, leaning against the table, looking like she didn't know how to sit properly. However, it was surprisingly cute and pretty. Her every move was alluring, making one unable to shift their gaze away. No Trace of Snow also walked over with a carefree look on his face. "Where do you think you've seen the magnolia?" Lin Ziqing held back his anger and told her about the places he had seen. The man was her companion. His name was Lu Renbing. He described the scene in detail. No Trace of Snow was silent for a moment. "It seems that we still don't know his exact location. His whereabouts are unpredictable, and he does things based on his mood. It seems that it will be difficult to find him in a short time." Lin Ziqing immediately said, "People like Bai Yulan are extremely evil. Wuhan, you must bring her to justice." Shui Wuhan nodded. He had handsome features, and his eyes were clear and righteous. Just by looking at him, she felt that there was actually such a wonderful man in this world. Lin Ziqing blushed. She held it in and said, "Then about our marriage, what do you think?" Wei Wei Bai, who was originally tilting her body and casually playing with the sweet cake on the plate, suddenly raised her eyebrows. Hearing this, he immediately raised his eyebrows fiercely. "What engagement?" Lin Ziqing couldn't help but say coldly, "My marriage agreement with No Trace." Wei Wei Bai immediately turned her head to look at No Trace of Snow. Pitiful tears appeared in her eyes. "Master, you're getting married?" No Trace of Snow looked deeply at her and said with a gentle expression, "No, it's Senior Lin who has done me a favor. He said that he would let Miss Lin marry me, but I haven't thought about it yet." Wei Wei Bai fiercely threw the sweet cake in her hand to the ground. "Why do you want to? You don't even like her. What are you thinking about?" To TXT. Chapter 1282. She was jealous so fiercely that people would think that she was his legal wife, not his disciple. No Trace of Snow had no choice but to tolerate it. "Wei Wei Bai, there's still guests. Don't be willful." Wei Wei Bai bit her lip hard and suddenly turned to leave, her footsteps heavy. The bell rang like rain all the way. "Marry her if you want. What does it have to do with me?" After she finished speaking, she stepped out of the house but suddenly turned back. The sunlight fell on her face, and her delicate and charming appearance had a kind of aggressive beauty. "Anyway, if you marry her, I won't be your disciple anymore." After saying that, she stormed off. If she was jealous, she had to let the whole world know. The system covered its head, thinking that the host of this world was like an evil villain cannon fodder. Finally, it earnestly advised, "Host, why are you holding back? Where's your acting? Your character is a little brainless." Wei Wei Bai walked far enough out of the house before her expression returned to its cold indifference. She said to the system, "Did the favorability increase?" The system said, "I can't tell you." It looked up and saw that the favorability had increased. Huh? Increased? What kind of strange increase was that? Wei Wei Bai's actions just now were not pleasing at all. How could it increase like that? Wei Wei Bai said, "It definitely increased. No Trace of Snow, that pervert, the more I show that I like him, the more excited he gets, and when he's excited, everything will increase." No Trace of Snow's biggest joy. He liked to see people fall from high places into hell. He was spoiling her to no end now because he wanted her to like him, so that she could fall into a desperate situation in the future. So she just had to follow his wishes and keep giving him the wrong impression. She loved him until the sky fell and the earth cracked. She loved him so much that she would do anything. Then he would be happy. They were all humans. As long as he was happy, his favorability would increase unknowingly. No matter how much it increased, she would benefit. Wei Wei Bai knew that her professional skills were not up to standard in the previous world. This plane worked hard and finally delved into the field of freaks. She had to be more perverted than a pervert to understand the perverted mentality. The system felt a little cold. Why did it feel like its host was emitting a black aura from head to toe? Then it sensed something and immediately said, Lin Ziqing followed you here. Bai Weiwei's face was calm. It's no problem. This old lady has never lost anyone in a cat fight. She put away the calmness on her face, then reached out and pinched the flower. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her tone was arrogant and vicious. What's so good about her being so ugly? Why didn't you reject her immediately? What qualifications does that ugly woman have to get close to you? All of a sudden, she sensed something. A beam of sword light stabbed toward her body. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She immediately rolled on the ground, but the sword light still pierced her arm. She covered her wound and looked up, only to see Lin Ziqing looking at her coldly. I didn't expect Wu Hin's disciple to be so vicious. Wu Hin was fooled by you, but I won't. You're not a good woman at all. Wei Wei Bai's eyes trembled. She bit her lip and stared at her. Lin Ziqing pressed on. I'll clean up the sect for Wu Hin. People like you are definitely remnants of the devil sect. Wei Wei Bai didn't seem to expect her to be right. Her whole body trembled, and a strong, murderous intent flashed in her eyes. A few poisonous needles appeared between her fingers. Lin Ziqing didn't know anything. She thought that she didn't know martial arts and couldn't escape from her sword. Wei Wei Bai didn't look like a decent person. She killed Wei Wei Bai, so Wu Hin couldn't blame her for anything. Slash. Chapter 1283. No Trace was too kind. How could he believe that such a girl had a pure heart? More importantly, Wei Wei Bai's face was too good. She was so dainty and had a foxy appearance. She was simply born to charm men. She was really not at ease with No Trace of Snow having such a disciple by his side. Lin Ziqing smiled sinisterly. The cold temperament on her face immediately disappeared. She said coldly, "If you die, I will tell No Trace that you attacked me first." Hatred appeared in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. Her mouth revealed a mocking smile. Jealous auntie is really ugly. I think Master definitely won't like an ugly person like you. Lin Ziqing was hit where it hurt. No Trace of Snow really didn't like her. The marriage was also forced on him. Back then, it was said that her father had saved No Trace of Snow's life, but in fact, at that time, even if her father didn't exist, No Trace of Snow could have escaped by himself. Her father was just one step ahead of them. Everyone knew Shui Wuhin's status in Jianghu. If he could marry his daughter to him, if his daughter married him, then the entire family would rise. And she wasn't doing it for those external benefits. She was doing it for No Trace of Snow. He could make any woman crazily pursue him. She had admired No Trace of Snow for so many years. Seeing such an opportunity in front of her, how could she tolerate it being destroyed by others? She raised her sword angrily and fiercely stabbed at Wei Wei Bai. You can like me, but you can't. Anyway, you can't see. No Trace of Snow had always been alone. Wei Wei Bai was the first woman to approach him. She couldn't tolerate Wei Wei Bai's existence. Wei Wei Bai looked at her with a cold smile. The poison needle in her hand suddenly shot out. Lin Ziqing suddenly felt a sharp pain on her face. The poison needles pierced her face, and the venom began to take effect, corroding her face. The long sword in her hand fell to the ground as she screamed and covered her face. "It hurts! It hurts!" Wei Wei Bai immediately grabbed the long sword on the ground, a fierce look in her eyes. "Looks like you're the one who died, old hack." The system hurriedly said, "The male lead has been here for a long time, and there are many onlookers." Wei Wei Bai was indifferent. I just want him to see it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put in so much effort to act. There was no hesitation in the sword in her hand, just as it was about to stab into Lin Ziqing's chest. An enormous strength that came from nowhere slapped her away. Wei Wei Bai, who had no internal energy, rolled into the flowers. Her chest churned, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She sat up in a daze. She saw No Trace of Snow standing in front of her. His clothes were as white as snow, and he was looking at her coldly. Wei Wei Bai blankly called out, "Master." Then she immediately pursed her lips and cried, "Master, that vicious woman wants to kill me." No Trace of Snow's face was full of disappointment. His tone was cold. "But what I saw was that you wanted to kill her." Wei Wei Bai's face showed a trace of anxiety and panic. "No, Master, it's her No trace of snow coldly rebuked. Enough. I thought you were just a little impulsive. You're still young, so you can't suppress your liveliness, but I didn't expect your heart to be so vicious. I'm really disappointed in you. Wei Wei Bai was dumbstruck, her lips trembling. Master, no trace of snow, turned around, wanting to look at Lin Ziqing. Her panicked voice could be heard as she gripped onto his trousers tightly with one hand. It's my fault, Master, I was wrong. Don't throw me away. Slash. Slash. Chapter 1284. No trace of snow shook off her hand and said coldly, I don't have such a vicious disciple like you. I don't want to see you again. After that, he went to Lin Ziqing's side to check on his injuries. Wei Wei Bai felt pain in her chest where no trace of snow hit her. She coughed and staggered to get up, looking deeply at no trace of snow. Then she clenched her teeth, coughed up blood, and turned to leave. It was raining. She was in a mess, her face full of despair. Wei Wei Bai said, Tongzi, am I miserable? The system said, you can still survive a natural disaster, but you deserve what you bring upon yourself. She was so miserable, she did it on purpose. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Sigh, pervert Snow must be very happy. The more he tortured her, the happier he would be. What perverted hobby? There was no enmity between them. He just loved torturing people. One idiot, there was something wrong with his brain. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell, covered in mud. Just as she was about to get up, a man was already standing in front of her, his slender body wearing a black robe and a beautiful dark mask covering his face. His voice was sinister and demonic. Isn't this my little maid? Why did you fall here? No trace of Snow's perverted speed of changing equipment was not just for show. Wei Wei Bai looked up, the tears in her eyes mixed with the rain. She bit her red lips so hard, blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. So pitiful, it made people's hearts tremble. The man paused. Wei Wei Bai had already grabbed onto his trousers. No trace of Snow thought she was going to resist, but she suddenly burst into tears. Master doesn't want me anymore. Master doesn't want me anymore. He doesn't want me anymore. She was like a child, crying pitifully. No trace of Snow was speechless for a moment. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something. Wei Wei Bai's expression suddenly changed. She looked up, revealing a charming smile. Then her voice was soft and sweet, with a natural sense of seduction. Master, you have to save me. No trace of Snow was speechless. Wei Wei Bai rubbed his thigh, like the most enchanting and charming water snake, so seductive that it was poisonous. She had a fawning look on her face. I know you're amazing. You can even forge an identity for me. And can you give me master? Shui Wuhan only felt that in her eyes. There was no morality, right or wrong, 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 wrong. This kind of unscrupulous, crazy emotion. It was really too. Shui Wuhan's fingers were trembling slightly, and even his breathing was a little chaotic. What of snow? Of snow of snow? Snow of snow to snow of snow, snow away. Bai was stunned. She frowned pitifully. Then I don't have anything to give anyone. I'll give myself to you. That was clearly the answer he liked. Why did he not feel happy when he heard it? Wei Wei Bai suddenly thought of something. She became happy. I have something to give you. Bend over and take it. No trace of Snow slowly bent over, his eyes extremely strange. What are you giving me? Wei Wei Bai smiled brightly, her tone gentle. I'm sending you to your death, bitch. No trace of Snow's smile froze. He found that he could not move. Wei Wei Bai had already stood up. She raised her fingernail. There was a small, colorless needle in it. He did not know how she hid it. When she grabbed his trousers just now, it pierced into his flesh. The rain disturbed him. He was too careless. Wei Wei Bai reached out, touched his waist, and pulled out the short sword on him, then patted his face with the sword. Shameful thing. Who do you think you are? How dare you make me call you master? Let me see how ugly your rotten face is. After saying that, her hand was already on his mask. The S/ to read the full articles to TXT downloads to read the S. Chapter 1285. This was the first time no trace of Snow had been restrained by someone. In the past, no matter how dangerous it was, he would only be injured. but he had never been plotted against to the point where he couldn't move, even if it was just a momentary success. For no trace of Snow, it was already unexpected. If it was his opponent who was strong in martial arts, he would have died long ago. No trace of Snow pretended to sigh. She was at a disadvantage because she didn't have martial arts. An adorable and pitiful evil child. When Wei Wei Bai's hand was about to lift his mask, he had already raised his hand and held her fingers. It was obviously not a strong force, but it made her unable to move. Wei Wei Bai suddenly widened her eyes. Impossible, you should be unable to move because of the poison. No trace of Snow looked at her without blinking. His voice was languid with a hint of laughter. Yes, I should be unable to move and let you do whatever you want. Wei Wei Bai tried to pull her hand back, but there was a sharp pain in her wrist. He increased the strength of his grip on her. It was as if she wanted to escape, he would break the bones in her wrist. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of cold light, but her smile was bright and beautiful. Brother, what are you doing? I'm just joking with you. She said it innocently. Her pink and white face had never been so pale. Even if she was smiling, it was still a forced fake smile. No trace of Snow's thin lips opened slightly, but his words were cruel. This poison of yours is really good. At first, you can't move, then your whole body will fester and die. Even if it's not intentional, you want to kill people. If it's intentional, won't you want to exterminate the whole family? She used the poison he gave to harm him. Wasn't this a joke? He had a very strong resistance to all the poisons that he made. Her lips trembled, and her brows furrowed tightly. The tears in her eyes were so obvious in the rain. Her tears were clearer than the rain. Her eyebrows, which should have been enchanting, were now extremely pitiful. He was slightly taken aback. He thought that she was afraid, but she bit her lips tightly. That's right, I'm evil by nature. So what if I annihilate an entire family? So what if I'm happy? She spoke in a fit of pique. It didn't seem like she was acting. Instead, she seemed to be genuinely upset and in pain. She had always been like a little fox, cunning and vicious. The pain was also an act to gain sympathy and obtain what one wanted. But today, her eyes were red and filled with despair and sorrow. This was genuine pain, without the slightest bit of pretentious fawning attitude that he usually had. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have thrown caution to the wind. She shouted at him heartbreakingly, I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. That's why Master doesn't want me. The smile on Shui Wuhan's face gradually faded. The way she broke down so quickly seemed to make him unhappy. Wei Wei Bai's thin shoulders trembled. The rain fell on her body, causing her exposed skin to turn red from the pain. She was a bit panicked, but also full of unwillingness. I've hidden so well. I've been a well-behaved puppet. I don't cause trouble. I don't kill people. I do whatever he wants me to do. Speaking to this point, Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, looking very pitiful. She said, to practice with concealed weapons, I even dared to stab needles into my nails. It was so painful that I couldn't sleep. I was afraid of being poisoned, so I could only eat the antidote as if it was my meal. I worked so hard, so why did I fall short of success? Her words. She condemned herself. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1286. I should have been stabbed to death by that bitch. Master would never abandon me. Wei Wei Bai's lips had turned white when she said this. She was very cold, and her whole body was trembling. Her palm-sized face and beautiful eyes were full of tears. It felt like there were more tears than the rain. She cried until the tip of her nose was red. Why can't I control myself? I should be bullied and not fight back. Only then will Master feel sorry for me. She was supposed to be vicious and live her life without fear. In the end, she had to compromise to this extent. No trace of Snow felt that he should be happy. It was so simple to torture her, but she actually completely broke down just like that. He had seen many scenes of people being sent to hell. Those people were all crying and wailing in extreme pain, just like Wei Wei Bai now. But that was not right. When others were in so much pain, he was like a farmer who worked hard and finally ate the fruits of his labor. He felt incomparably sweet. But Wei Wei Bai was in so much pain. Why didn't he feel happy at all? It was more like there was a breath stuck in his chest. She broke down too easily. Did she like him that much? No trace of Snow's eyes were extremely dark. He slowly reached out his hand and slowly slid his fingers across her face. The skin that he touched was so cold that no trace of Snow could not help but frown. An ordinary person without inner strength could actually stand here with him for so long in such a cold rain. Wei Wei Bai did not care that he was touching her face and kept crying. Her head was lowered and her hand was held by him. She was as thin and frail as the wildflower that had been beaten by the roadside. She could disappear at any time. The system watched as the host turned into a crybaby. The little demoness did not want to be anymore. She became a crybaby. Her acting skills were such a high level. Why did it rise again? The host was crying so much that it wanted to beat her to death. It silently flipped open perverted psychology. Indeed, it had to live and learn, otherwise it would be abandoned by the host. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "Did your favorability increase?" "I can't say." Wei Wei Bai, "Then it's going up." It was just an increase of 1 point in favorability. This was nothing to be proud of. Wei Wei Bai, no trace of Snow, that pervert, must be disgusted to death right now. I'll break down in front of him and make him sullen to death, that sick bastard. The system finally had a heart attack. Why is he so sullen? Shouldn't the host be the one feeling aggrieved? He was crying so miserably that his eyes were about to fall out. Wei Wei Bai smiled calmly. Do you know that there's a kind of person who likes to save people from hell, lift them up to heaven, and then ruthlessly push them back into hell? No trace of Snow. Wei Wei Bai. Yes, but no trace of Snow didn't think deeply at all. He thought that he wanted to see the pain of those people falling into hell. But what he actually likes is the process of pushing those people into hell. Wei Wei Bai touched the dumbfounded system. No trace of Snow likes the process of those people admiring him, loving him, and then being betrayed by him. Their faith is destroyed by him bit by bit, and then being destroyed again bit by bit. She, on the other hand, was reckless when she liked him. Love at first sight. She didn't need no trace of Snow to do anything. When she broke down immediately. She still didn't need no trace of Snow to do anything. To make her like him, no trace of Snow probably came up with a lot of ideas and plans. / crossover system. Adonis, come over here. Chapter 12, 87. But this kind of excitement, seeing her so miserably lying next to him, cooled his heart down. Before he could enjoy it, she broke down first. How useless. No trace of Snow coldly raised the corner of his mouth. It was better to find the next, stronger person to torture. He saw that she was trembling uncomfortably, looked at her coldly for a while, then reached out to undress her. Her peach-pink clothes were thin and delicate, unable to cover much of her curves after being drenched in the rain. The clothes clung tightly to her exquisite body. On her pure white arm, a conspicuous wound appeared. Blood was still seeping out, and the edges of the wound were white. No trace of Snow looked at her coldly, then took out the medicine and sprinkled it on her. Then he took off her clothes. Inch by inch, the clothes were taken off, and her snow-white and soft body appeared in front of him. No trace of Snow was expressionless as he changed her clothes. Just when the system thought that he was a natural eunuch, no trace of Snow's fingers suddenly paused. Then, as if he didn't care, his fingertips slowly touched the skin on her chest. That action was ambiguous and had a kind of elegant, morbid feeling. It was like a lick before tasting a delicacy. Under his fingertips was her delicate, silk-like skin. No trace of Snow's eyes darkened, but he still covered her with the blanket. Then he took off his mask and hid it. He also changed his clothes. He planned to make Wei Wei Bai scram as soon as she woke up. After all, she had already broken down. There was no need to torture her, just let her fend for herself. She loved him so much if he didn't want her. The rest of her life would be very painful. No trace of Snow smiled coldly. This was good. Maybe one day he would remember to visit her. Look at her incomparably miserable appearance. Thinking of this, His gloomy mood finally improved a little. Wei Bai slept a little painfully. She guessed that she had a fever. And that pervert, no trace of snow, just let her burn. She was thinking about no trace of Snow's psychological state in her high fever, so she just let her fend for herself. Did he give up on her because she overdid it? Wei Bai frowned. It seemed that she still had to work while sick. Then, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were still red, and there was a hint of seductiveness in them. She immediately sat up on the bed, as if she was on high alert. Her fingers were about to touch the needles she had hidden, but she found that the needles were gone. Even her clothes had been changed. Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt, but when she looked up, she saw something. There was a man sitting by the window. He was wearing a moon-white robe, and the warm sunlight shone on his body. His handsome face seemed to glow beautifully. Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of infatuation. She choked up a little. "Master, did you save me?" Shui Wuhin was expressionless and looked at her indifferently. Then he said in a cold voice, "Lin Ziqing's face is already disfigured. She wanted me to hand you over, but I didn't agree." Wei Bai's eyes brightened a little. "Master, you still feel sorry for me." No trace of Snow sighed hypocritically. "You don't have to call me master in the future. I took you in as a disciple because I pitied you, but I didn't know that you were so vicious. You can leave later. Don't tell others that I'm your master in the future." After saying that, he got up without hesitation and immediately walked out. After taking 2 steps, he didn't hear Wei Bai's cries. This was unexpected. He couldn't help but turn his head, only to see Wei Bai staring at him blankly. It seemed like she hadn't reacted yet. No trace of Snow deliberately left some time for her to digest this sad news. Wei Bai was stunned and fell silent. / crossover system. Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1288. The system couldn't help but say, "Host, you're out of ideas, right? I told you not to be too reckless, but you didn't listen. You scared the male lead away." Wei Bai's face flashed with a hint of struggle. "I'm just worried about my life points, so I'm hesitating whether or not to shop." What did she want to buy every time? Her heart felt like it was being trampled by an elephant, and it was being trampled back and forth. Her heart made a sound. Her heart hurt so much. There's an aphrodisiac in the discounted items, right? There must be. The system said, "There's a condom. Do you want it?" Wei Bai said, "If you want an aphrodisiac, you want an aphrodisiac, one that the target can't resist, one that can be activated with air." The system flipped through the discounted items. There's an aphrodisiac flower, which is relatively unpopular among the aphrodisiacs, so it's cheap. 8 days of life points. 8 days. Her heart that had been trampled by an elephant 8 times, Wei Bai said, Buy quickly. If she didn't buy it now, the target would really go to someone else. Who knew that a perverted coward like No Trace of Snow would be scared away so quickly? Wasn't she just acting a little more desolate? He actually gave up just like that. She harshly marked him down in her heart again. If she didn't torture him to the point where he could stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun in the future, she would livestream herself eating No Trace of Snow alive. The flower of the aphrodisiac silently attached itself to the Chinese rose by the window when no one noticed. The wind blew gently. A faint sweet smell began to permeate the air with the wind. Wei Bai was afraid that No Trace of Snow would notice this strange smell, so she immediately woke up from her daze. Then, with a pale face, she directly got off the bed and staggered towards No Trace of Snow. No Trace of Snow finally saw the painful expression he wanted to see. He was satisfied and wanted to leave. Wei Bai had already hugged his back. Her body was tightly pressed against him, soft and warm, with the unique fragrance of a young girl. No Trace of Snow stopped in his tracks. However, he heard Wei Bai's coquettish voice. "Master, you're just angry at me. You won't abandon me, right?" No Trace of Snow sneered, and then said in a disappointed tone, "Don't call me master in the future." Wei Bai trembled. She panicked. "Master, do you really not want me anymore?" No Trace of Snow enjoyed her painful final struggle. He said almost maliciously, "Yes, I don't want you anymore." Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled as she gripped his clothes tightly. She muttered nervously, "You can't abandon me. You can't. I like you, master." No trace of Snow's heart seemed to have been touched. However, it was only for a moment, and it wasn't deep, so he ignored it. He seemed to be a little confused, and then suddenly became angry. He turned around and pushed him away. "What are you talking about? Is this something you can say?" It was against ethics and morality for a master and disciple to love each other. Wei Wei Bai fell to the ground and looked at him blankly. Suddenly, she revealed a charming smile. She said, "Master, why can't I say these things? Wei Wei likes you. I don't care about ethics and morality." No trace of Snow's body trembled. He took a deep breath, as if he was so angry that he didn't know what to do. "Get out of here immediately. Don't dirty the ground here." Bai Weiwei's smile stiffened. She forced herself to remain calm, but she finally couldn't hold on any longer. She looked at him helplessly. "Master, don't chase me away." No trace of Snow flung his sleeves and looked at her coldly. "Get out now, or I'll kill you." Wei Wei Bai heard his words and said softly, "So you wanted to kill me?" Then she looked up, her face full of sadness. "Then I'll go. Master doesn't want me. I'll be obedient." This wasn't like her at all. She loved so humbly. She should have a character that was unscrupulous. No trace of Snow watched as she struggled to stand up. She staggered a few steps and walked to his side. "Then I'll go. Master, you have to take good care of yourself in the future." No trace of Snow's face was tense. He set up the image of a cold but bright master. Suddenly, he frowned. He felt that something was wrong. A warm feeling surged up in his body. Was it? He staggered a few steps and reached out to hold on to the door. He looked up, a trace of surprise finally appearing in his cold eyes. Wei Wei Bai had already turned around and reached out to support him. "Master, I can go," she said considerately. After struggling to pull him onto the bed, Wei Wei Bai followed him onto the bed. No trace of Snow's breathing became heavy and hot. He felt his body sink, but he saw Wei Wei Bai straddling him. She reached out and tore open his clothes. Her face was full of despair just now. However, it carried with it a distinct beauty that burned with reckless abandon. "Master!" She bent down, took off his last piece of clothing inch by inch, and put it close to his ear. A scorching hot breath blew into his ears. "Even if I want to go, I'll go with you first, T." Chapter 1289. The marriage between Wei Wei Bai and No Trace of Snow quickly spread throughout the martial arts world. As the leader of the martial arts world, No Trace of Snow was a person with zero negative reviews, good looks, high martial arts, and high financial resources. His marriage was the focus of the entire martial arts world. Many decent martial arts sects had daughters of marriageable age waiting to marry No Trace of Snow, so that they could raise their status by 3 levels. In the end, No Trace of Snow, who had never been close to women, turned out to be his little disciple. It was fine if it was his little disciple, but she was actually planning to get married. The hearts of so many young ladies were shattered. The face of so many righteous sects and clans was also shattered. How could this be? Where was his ethics? As the leader of the martial arts world with 0 negative reviews, how could he bear such a big stain? So for a time, all kinds of objections surged like a wave. But No Trace of Snow did not tell Wei Wei Bai about this, and he bore it alone. He acted as a love-crazed, fearless, and infatuated man. And to let Wei Wei Bai know about his sacrifice. He even deliberately let those talkative servants serve Wei Wei Bai, so that these things could be told to her through the mouths of others. This was the most natural way. Wei Wei Bai listened to the gossip and nibbled on melon seeds with a sad face. "So everyone treats Master like this. It's all my fault." The melon seeds were delicious. If I didn't love him so much, I would have left him. The sweet cakes were delicious too. "I'm sorry, Master." This small cake was delicious too. After eating too much, she drank a mouthful of tea and tasted the top taste of the tea. Then, her eyes revealed forbearance and anger, but more than that, heartache. Her eyes reddened, and she whispered softly, "Wu Hen, what should I eat for dinner?" The chef here was not bad. The servant returned to report that no trace of Snow was satisfied. She relied on him little by little, felt heartache for him, and loved him even more. He smiled coldly, feeling indescribably happy. Meanwhile, Wei Wei Bai rubbed her stomach and said, "I'm full. I need to go out and digest." The system touched its belt. Where did its belly go? It seemed to have shrunk all the way to his back. Wei Wei Bai was full and glowing. She rolled up her sleeves and planned to stir up trouble. After all, she was not a little white flower who only knew how to cry. People who came out of the devil sect could not fail in anything. Just like that, everyone had it. What a vicious heart. Otherwise, why would he join the devil sect? Wouldn't it be better to play with the righteous martial artists? So she asked the system to find the sects that had said bad things about their marriage. In the end, they saw those who opposed no trace of Snow's marriage gathered together for a meeting. And the leader was actually Lin Ziqing. She heard that when Lin Ziqing heard about this marriage, he simply smashed everything and cursed them harshly every day. At the same time, he instigated all those who opposed the marriage to gather together and use ethical reasons to stop the marriage. Once a woman fell out of love, she was not much different from a member of the devil sect. Bai Weiwei was wearing a peach-colored dress. Her hair was tied with a bright red ribbon, and a pink rose was pinned to her hair bun. Seeing the little manservant at the door leading a horse, she smiled brightly at him. Her smile was clear and beautiful, with a hint of charm. It was naturally seductive. She reached out her snow-white fingers and hooked the reins in the manservant's hand. She said to him, "I want this horse." Her voice was clear and sweet. She was obviously willful and reckless, but it made people unable to feel bad about her. The manservant's face reddened, and he did not know what to say. Next time you open the bookshelf, you will be able to see it. If you like, no trace of Snow would never marry Wei Wei Bai. Who would marry a woman from the demon sect would be spurned and hunted down by the righteous sects of the martial arts world. Slash. Chapter 1291. In a place where no one could see, Lin Ziqing's bandaged face revealed a trace of a strange smile. Her voice was still steady and calm. "Then let's write a letter together and ask the alliance leader to give up on this marriage." Everyone nodded. That's right. Lin Ziqing saw that the situation was good and immediately said hypocritically, "Is there anyone else who doesn't agree? If you all agree, then sign it." "I don't agree." These words rang out clearly and abruptly. Everyone turned around in shock, but they saw a peach-red figure under the sunlight, like the most brilliant red clouds, like a brilliant peach blossom, barging in just like that. The bells on her ankles rang all the way. There was a kind of burning beauty to her flowing eyebrows. It was as if she had suddenly appeared and crashed into everyone's eyes. She lit up a beautiful firework. Even Lin Ziqing, who had already seen her before, was stunned for a moment. Wei Wei Bai smiled brightly, her voice as pleasant as the bells. "I don't agree." Lin Ziqing came back to her senses. She saw the culprit who had disfigured her and hated her so much that her teeth were bleeding. After the accident, she had been looking for Wei Wei Bai, but she was protected by no trace of Snow and couldn't find her at all. And they couldn't force their way into no trace of Snow's house. Now, she was actually stupid enough to deliver herself to them. They just had to kill her immediately. Even if no trace of Snow came, they could pretend to kill her by mistake. Then this matter would be over. Lin Ziqing immediately said with a smile, "You came at the right time, Demoness. Tell me clearly what kind of demon you used to bewitch the alliance leader and make him so infatuated with you." She had to force Wei Wei Bai to admit that she was a member of the demon sect. Wei Wei Bai looked at her with some confusion. "What kind of demon did you say I used to bewitch No Trace?" She had just finished asking and didn't wait for anyone to answer. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. "What kind of monster can I use to confuse him? Look at me. Don't you all understand?" Lin Ziqing frowned. "You're bewitching the masses with your lies. What can I understand from looking at you?" Wei Wei Bai's figure was lithe and graceful. Her steps were light as she moved. Her dress was like a cloud, moving with her footsteps. Her appearance almost stole everyone's attention. She walked in front of Lin Ziqing with the same smile on her face. She gently moved closer to look at Lin Ziqing's face. Then, in a voice that was not loud but loud enough for everyone to hear, she said, "Of course it's my face, ugly freak. Of course it was my face, ugly freak." Lin Ziqing saw her face clearly. At such a close distance, he was even more shocked. She was so beautiful that no one dared to look at her directly. Her face, which was wrapped in bandages, appeared in the middle of her clear eyes. It was a stark contrast. The woman's self-esteem was completely crushed by Wei Wei Bai. Lin Ziqing almost screamed, "Wei Wei Bai, you demoness. You're the one who used a special drug to confuse Wuhan. You're from the demon sect, aren't you?" Wei Wei Bai turned around casually. Her figure was like flowing clouds and water. It was indescribably beautiful. She laughed, charmingly and mockingly, and then said to everyone present, "Uncles, listen to what you're saying. In this day and age, how can you accuse an innocent woman of being a member of the devil's sect without any evidence?" At this point, Wei Wei Bai sighed. "I don't even know martial arts. The people from the demon sect are all highly skilled in martial arts. I don't even know where the demon sect is, let alone the demon sect. And read the at https://www.sashu.com/ and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com and read the full article at https://m/sashu.com save button. You will be able to see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like, comma. Chapter 1292. With that said, the people present looked at each other. They had never seen Wei Wei Bai before. Lin Ziqing was the one who told them about Wei Wei Bai. Hence, they did not have a good impression of Wei Wei Bai. No trace of Snow's attitude was also a little strange. Hence, it was reasonable for them to suspect that Wei Wei Bai was a spy from the demon sect. But looking at Wei Wei Bai today, any man could not help but reveal a look of understanding. How was she a demon? With this girl's appearance, she would not be able to control herself, let alone her disciple. Even if she was married, there would still be people who wanted to snatch her away. No trace of Snow was fair and just, but they were all men. Men all had the same problem. It was reasonable for women to bring disaster to the country. Wei Wei Bai stood there. Some of the people present were uncertain. They did not know how to look at her. Lin Ziqing saw that others were wavering. She immediately drew her sword. "Wei Wei Bai, you have a vicious heart. My face was ruined by you. How dare you speak nonsense and distort right and wrong?" She had thought that Wei Wei Bai would curse back viciously. She would take the opportunity to stab her to death. However, she saw that Wei Wei Bai's thin body suddenly trembled. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, revealing a fair and beautiful neck. It was so fragile that it made one's heart break. Tears fell from her eyes. "Sister Ziqing, I know that you like Wuhan, but Wuhan really likes me. Please don't target me like this, okay?" It was a beautiful face, but once it was touched by tears, she suddenly looked pitiful. Wei Wei Bai cried pitifully. "I know I'm not good. My parents were killed. I don't know martial arts. I'm not good enough for Wuhan." These words were so innocent and pitiful. Wei Wei Bai covered her face. "But Wuhan wants me. I want to leave him, but he doesn't want me to." Lin Ziqing was so angry that he couldn't even hold his sword steadily. Bai Wei Wei's call ended, not clearly pointing at her nose and scolding her. Was she a vicious woman who deliberately slandered Wei Wei Bai because she liked no trace of Snow? Wei Wei Bai turned around and coincidentally met Lin Ziqing's face. A trace of disdain flashed through her eyes. Lin Ziqing's mind exploded. She was so angry that she lost all reason. The sword in his hand stabbed out without hesitation. "Puchi!" The sound of a sword piercing into flesh rang out. Lin Ziqing looked at the white cloth at the tip of the sword. Bright red blood slowly seeped out of the white cloth, piercing one's eyes. She looked up in disbelief. When he saw no trace of snow, his handsome face turned pale, and he stood in front of Wei Wei Bai. Lin Ziqing's sword pierced directly into his chest. Wu Hen. Lin Ziqing was so scared that she cried on the spot. She hurriedly threw the sword away. The sword was pulled out of no trace of Snow's chest. The wound wasn't deep, but a lot of blood flowed out. It looked abnormally scary. No trace of Snow looked at her expressionlessly. His eyes were cold, and there was no trace of his usual gentleness. He let the blood flow. Then, without looking at Lin Ziqing, he turned around and faced the martial artists. Everyone, Senior Lin saved my life back then. Now that his daughter has stabbed me, I won't hold it against her. Take it as me repaying Senior Lin for saving my life back then. He was covered in blood, but his posture was still like an immortal. His neither servile nor overbearing appearance made many people blush. No trace of Snow was still the convincing no trace of Snow. He didn't look like he was confused by the demoness like Lin Ziqing said. In fact, no trace of Snow didn't do anything wrong. He just married his own disciple. Chapter 1293. Although that disciple said that it was Lin Ziqing who disfigured her, but everyone knew that it was Lin Ziqing who made the first move and wanted to kill, which provoked Wei Wei Bai to resist. No trace of Snow also said that it was an accident that caused Lin Ziqing's disfigurement. After all, that poison was personally made by No Trace of Snow, and he even gave the antidote. And with Lin Ziqing's series of actions, it was obvious that she wanted to kill Wei Wei Bai. For a moment, everyone looked at Lin Ziqing with a strange expression. Lin Ziqing was so scared that she was trembling. When she heard No Trace of Snow's words, she couldn't stand and leaned against the chair. Her father was No Trace of Snow's savior. This matter was very important. Everyone knew. This was also the bargaining chip that allowed her to get close to No Trace of Snow without any fear. But now, after the stab, there was nothing left. The blood on No Trace of Snow's chest flowed to the hem of his clothes, and drops of blood fell to the ground. His pale face looked at Wei Wei Bai, and his expression became gentle. Why are you here? You don't have martial arts. If something happens when you go out, will it take my life? His words were calm and gentle, but they were filled with a man's most infatuated feelings. Wei Wei Bai stood there in a daze, as if she couldn't understand what she saw. Her voice trembled. Master, No Trace of Snow sighed. It's okay. It's just a small injury. Wei Wei Bai staggered forward 2 steps and reached out to cover his chest. Her face was suddenly excessively pale, even paler than No Trace of Snow. Her breathing was unstable. Are you okay? There's so much blood. Why is there so much blood? The deliberately provocative beauty and unbridled bravado just now were gone. There was only genuine worry, wholehearted fear. No Trace of Snow's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to tell her not to worry, her pupils shrank. Her pupils suddenly shrank. Her expression hardened as she looked at Lin Ziqing with hatred. Without any hesitation, she placed her hand on the sword at his waist. Then, he suddenly pulled out his sword. The sword light reflected the hatred in her eyes. Lin Ziqing, I want you dead. She was so resolute that she didn't care about the fact that she didn't know any martial arts. She actually had the attitude of wanting to perish together with Lin Ziqing. No Trace of Snow was stunned for a moment and missed the opportunity to grab the sword. Wei Wei Bai had already rushed towards Lin Ziqing with her sword in hand. His footwork was clearly disorganized, and he couldn't even hold his sword steadily. However, that ferocious intent of perishing together with his opponent was still terrifying. Lin Ziqing was still in a daze. When she saw Wei Wei Bai rushing over, she didn't think much and was about to hit her with her palm. If this hit landed, Wei Wei Bai would be seriously injured and vomit blood. The next moment, No Trace of Snow sighed helplessly. His figure was like lightning as he appeared between them. Palm to palm, he forced Lin Ziqing back. Then, he grabbed Wei Wei Bai's waist with one hand and snatched her sword. After putting it back into the scabbard at his waist, he picked up Wei Wei Bai. A series of actions flashed like lightning and thunder. People with low martial arts skills couldn't see No Trace of Snow's actions clearly. Wei Wei Bai was still like an enraged stray cat. She struggled with all her might and shouted angrily at Lin Ziqing. Lin Ziqing, you bitch. You dare to hurt my master. I'll take your life. Vicious and poisonous words. But people couldn't help but pity her. To steal a man, you see, these two women have gone crazy. Then, everyone looked at No Trace of Snow with admiration. This was a real man. To be so popular, it was simply admirable. No Trace of Snow coughed. Wei Wei, my wound is about to split open. // Chapter 1294. The wound was not serious at first, but because of her struggle, it was about to split open. Wei Wei Bai suddenly froze and did not dare to move. Her voice softened. Are you okay, master? Her voice was choked with sobs, and there was no trace of the ferocious look she had just now. This kind of softness and weakness for one person and pricked up thorns for others. It was simply No Trace of Snow took a deep breath, and excitement rushed up from the bottom of his feet. He suppressed it and said gently, I'm fine, let's go. No Trace of Snow hugged Wei Wei Bai and said to the crowd, Please be present at my wedding with Wei Wei. Although she is a little lively, she is a good girl. After saying that, he frowned and hurriedly left. When he got home, he asked the doctor to apply medicine. Bai Wei Wei had been sitting next to him, her eyes red and miserable. No Trace of Snow was as gentle as ever and kept comforting her patiently. The system was silent. It looked at Wei Wei Bai and then at No Trace of Snow. It was being attacked by these two drama queens. Lin Ziqing was a little pitiful. It took a look at the favorability level. Oh, it increased again. When the favorability level increased to the point where it could open the data, it immediately knocked on Wei Wei Bai. Host, the data of the flower on your shoulder is complete. Wei Wei Bai looked at No Trace of Snow pitifully and said, What's the follow-up information? The system was silent for a while before saying, It's like this, No Trace of Snow practiced a very tragic martial art. Wei Wei Bai, what martial art? Eating human flesh. How tragic could it be otherwise? The system, virgin technique. Wei Wei Bai, what was worse than eating human flesh was not being able to eat meat. Hey, that's not right. Didn't No Trace of Snow lose his virginity? Tongzi gall my ass. The system said faintly, But you're different. When he slept with someone else, he went berserk and died, but when he slept with you, his martial arts improved greatly. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of information was this? The system said, Your flower was born naturally, which means that you have the extreme Yin physique. It's also a good item for purging fire. Wei Wei Bai, stop. You don't have to be so blunt. Do you want to be blocked? The system said, Oh, you're different for the rest. No Trace of Snow's martial art is very fiery, but can't be broken. You're the only one who can relieve his pain and improve his martial art. Wei Wei Bai, am I that awesome? The system said, If you do it a few more times, he'll be alive and you'll be dead. His body is filled with poisonous flames, and every time, he would use you as an antidote. When the poisonous flames in his body disappear, your body will not be able to hold on and collapse. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth. Fuck, that vicious bastard. No wonder he looked at me so strangely. He was using me as an antidote. The system heard her muttering. Although I know that side rewards are unreliable, it's never been this bad before. The system said, What side reward? Wei Wei Bai, the beautiful body, isn't it my side reward? The system said, Your side reward is not this. Wei Wei Bai, then what is it? The system endured the pain and took out the few remaining treasures from its drawer. It can resurrect the dead once. As long as the corpse is complete, you could be revived. If it wasn't for the fact that this plane was 3 times more difficult, it would not have taken it out. It was so poor that it was about to starve to death. It was still worried about the life of this heartless host. Wei Wei Bai shivered. I feel like I hit the jackpot with this side reward. The system turned around silently. You don't even look at who gave it to you. No Trace of Snow saw Wei Wei Bai shivering and thought that she was afraid. He showed an infatuated smile. It's okay, the wound isn't deep. Wei Wei Bai showed a strained smile, but could not say anything. He had never met such a scumbag. and it was such a scumbag that he wanted to torture his strategy target to death. Compared to this, his previous strategy targets were all obedient babies. Download the at https://m Sashu com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 1295. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have sensed someone behind her. She immediately turned around, her skirt spinning. When she saw that it was no trace of Snow, she immediately rushed over and held his hand. "Master, I've brought the bath water for you. Hurry up and take a bath." No trace of Snow's cold expression turned gentle. "This kind of small matter should be done by the servants. You don't need to do it." Wei Wei Bai was bright and charming. "This is Master's matter. I'll serve you, and I'll serve you willingly." No trace of Snow's footsteps paused. She could always naively and casually say such things that made people happy. Love with all her heart. It was actually so easy to obtain. No trace of Snow should have found it boring, and he used to find it boring. But he didn't know why. But during this period of time, he didn't have the cold attitude he used to have towards her love for him. He didn't find it boring. No trace of Snow even thought that it wouldn't matter if she stayed by his side. After all, she was quite interesting. As soon as this thought appeared, his pupils suddenly shrank. This kind of thought was almost impossible for him to have. It was his nature to like the new and dislike the old. There had never been a person who could give him a sense of freshness for more than a month. She was almost 2 months old. He actually didn't feel bored. Wei Wei Bai saw that he was in a daze, so she reached out and waved her hand in front of his eyes. No trace of Snow immediately returned to his senses. He smiled and gently held her hand. "I'm going to take a bath. You should also go." Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and gently held his wrist. His pulse trembled slightly. Her hand had already followed his wrist and moved up, pulling his sleeve and pulling it forward. More than half of his coat was pulled out by her, and the other half hung on his body, revealing the white clothes underneath. No trace of Snow said somewhat helplessly, "Wei Wei." Wei Wei Bai smiled and said, "Isn't Master injured? When you're bathing, you must remember not to get wet. So, just wipe yourself, and I'll help you take off your clothes." Shui Wuhan raised her eyes and looked at her face. She had bright eyes, white teeth, red lips, and white teeth. She was born with a hint of flirtatiousness, and her eyes were pure and alluring. He felt the flames in his body burn even brighter. Then, he heard his own hoarse voice ring out, saying something that he shouldn't have said. "Then I'll have to trouble you to serve me." Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a moment before she smiled happily. "Sure, Master." Then she undressed him. His white undershirt wrapped around his muscular body. When she unbuttoned his clothes, her fingertips slowly brushed past the lines of his muscles. No trace of Snow was incomparably indifferent, as if he was unmoved. Wei Wei Bai also looked innocent, as if she didn't know what she had done. The system said, "Host, you've lit a fire. Didn't I say that this male lead's body was filled with poisonous flames?" How could the host forget that he was always flirting with people? Wei Wei Bai said, "It's okay. The sooner I die, the sooner I'll be reincarnated. Anyway, I still have a chance to revive. If I don't court death, how can I spend the reward?" The system, Wei Wei Bai said, "Reviving from the dead. This kind of reward makes me very willing to die generously. Also, if I don't die once, how can I farm more favorability points? Without favorability points, I can't torture No Trace of Snow." This piece of trash was asking for a beating. After so long, he still didn't have 50 favorability points. How could he be so stingy? The system, it wasn't that it didn't want to speak, but when No Trace of Snow took off the last piece of clothing from his body, it was blocked. Address of the full text: https://www. Sashu. Address of the Chapter 1296. Was this trying to take his life? Wei Wei Bai felt that No Trace of Snow was trying to take her life. This man was planning to transfer the poisonous fire to her in one go. Let her directly die and enter the grave. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore. Her fingers lazily rested on his shoulder, and her voice was as soft as water as she begged him. No trace of Snow's eyes were terrifyingly deep. His ink-black hair fell on his naked body, bewitching and exquisite. He said in a low voice, "It's almost done. Wei Wei Bai, the way you lie is really hateful." In her dizziness, she felt that no trace of Snow's fingers seemed to have already pinched her neck. As if by instinct, she softly called out, "Master." Her long hair was scattered, like the most gorgeous monster in the night. Her half-closed eyes were confused and ignorant, as if she didn't know how attractive she looked. His fingers couldn't help but soften as they stroked her neck. In the end, he still couldn't bear to pinch her. Wei Wei Bai knew that it was because her body was still useful. That was why this damn bastard couldn't bear to do it. Without the favorability prompt, everything depended on her own experience to guess his thoughts. This also made it difficult for her to catch the rhythm of his increase in favorability. Without the prompt of favorability, the workload increased by more than 1 or 2 points. Just as Wei Wei Bai was dizzy and finally fainted. In the darkness, no trace of Snow's eyes flashed with intense conflict. His breathing was heavy, as if he was in pain. His eyes were fixed on Wei Wei Bai, who was below him, and his expression was twisted for a moment. Most of the poisonous fire had already spread to her body. He should have been comfortable, but there was another terrible pain in his body that was tormenting him. It was his chest, where his heart was. No trace of Snow reached out to cover his chest and swallowed back a mouthful of blood. It was the precursor to chi deviation. No trace of Snow endured for a long time before calming down. The crazy thing about this martial art was not the poisonous flames, but the inability to be emotional. If he was aroused, his martial arts would directly devour his body. Back then, when he had chosen this martial art, he had scoffed at the fact that he could not be moved. After all, he was cold by nature and would not be moved by anyone. Therefore, he did not hesitate to take this path. But today, no trace of Snow thought of the pain in his chest. It was all because of Wei Wei Bai. He got up and looked at the girl on the bed expressionlessly. Her brows were slightly furrowed. Her lips were bitten by him, and her face was pink and tender. She was as beautiful as a flower bud. Her slender wrist rested outside the blanket, her fingertips delicate and slender. All of them were exquisite. All of them made people feel enchanting and pure. No trace of Snow silently put her hand back into the quilt, then put on his clothes and walked out. Under the moonlight, he suddenly pulled out a flower branch and turned it into sword chi, dancing swiftly and fiercely. His swordsmanship was unparalleled. His inner strength flowed endlessly, and he started to worry about not being able to use it up. After the poisonous flames left, the last flaw in his martial arts was about to be solved. As long as he did it 1 or 2 more times, he would be completely healed. As for Wei Wei Bai, his swordsmanship paused, and the image of her smiling sweetly at him seemed to flash before his eyes. Then he thought of her vicious and vicious side. Even this side of her was so gorgeous that no other woman could compare to her. Every frown and smile was simply born to charm men. As long as she was willing, no man could refuse her. But she only had him in her eyes. This kind of feeling was terrifyingly hot. No trace of Snow had been cold for half of his life, but this was the first time he had encountered such a straightforward and direct love. It was so hot that it seemed to be able to scorch his incomparably cold heart / crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. Download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu. Next time you open the bookshelf, you will be able to see it. Chapter 1297. A mouthful of blood surged up. He coughed and spat it out. No trace of Snow propped himself up on the flower branch, his long hair hanging down. He was silent for a while before coldly looking up. He actually fell in love. It was still not too late. There was still time to extinguish this level of passion. no trace of snow crushed the flower branch and threw it away. Then he walked back with a cold face. However, he saw a slender figure leaning against the door. She seemed to have just woken up. Her sleepy eyes reflected the moonlight. Delicate as the moon, a beauty without equal. No trace of snow stood there in a daze. Wei Wei Bai yawned as if she had no bones. Only then did she see no trace of snow. "Master, where did you run off to in the middle of the night?" she softly complained. Then she took the robe and walked towards him under the moonlight. When she came in front of him, she frowned and said, "It's cold. Why didn't you put on more clothes before running out?" "Put on." Wei Wei Bai did not have her usual mischievous look. Her beautiful face had a serious softness because of worry. No trace of snow did not speak. Instead, he hid in the darkness and lowered his eyes to look at her. Wei Wei Bai was sleepy and tired. She reached out and tugged at his clothes to make him lower his body. Then, she reached out and put the robe on him. Idiot, be obedient. She was simply tired and confused. She did not feel any respect for him at all. No trace of snow put on the robe and was led back to the room by her. Her ankles were exposed under the skirt. The sound of the bell was very cute. Shui Wuhan felt another wave of pain in his chest. He narrowed his eyes dangerously and bent his fingers a little. Murderous intent emerged from his eyes. Wei Wei Bai did not seem to know his murderous intent at all. Instead, she muttered, "Master, I'm so tired. My body is still very hot." She was awakened by the heat. The killing intent in his eyes immediately disappeared. He knew why she felt hot. This was because the poisonous flames on her body had started to change her body. She had no martial arts and no internal energy to resist. The poisonous flames began to erode her life force. Of course she would feel hot. After entering the house, Wei Wei Bai climbed onto the bed in a daze and then rolled the blanket over herself. She closed her eyes to sleep and opened them again. She seemed to have thought of something and took out half of the blanket covering her body. Then he closed his eyes and continued to sleep peacefully. She didn't seem to have woken up from the beginning to the end. She only woke up because of the heat and saw him outside. She seemed to think that he would be cold, so she gave him a robe, put it on him, and led him back. After doing this, she felt that she had completed her task and could sleep. No trace of snow looked at the other half of the blanket, then at her closed eyes and trembling eyelashes. A thin layer of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her cheeks turned even redder, making her look gorgeous and charming. He looked at her silently for a while. Suddenly, he reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. A surge of inner strength slowly passed over. Combing through the poisonous flames in her body couldn't save her, nor could it save her life. But it could make her feel comfortable. Soon, her eyebrows relaxed and the sweat stopped. Her breathing gradually stabilized. Her sleeping face was incomparably peaceful in the darkness. No trace of snow sat by the bed and watched her all night, until the morning light entered the window and elongated his figure. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 50. When Wei Wei Bai woke up and heard the system's prompt, she suddenly had a bad premonition. She had just said that the favorability hadn't increased to 50, but in the end, it increased to 50 in one night. Last night, other than putting a robe on him as a gentle strategy, she didn't do anything else. To TXT, comma. Chapter 1298. It seemed like there was nothing that could touch his heart. However, a man like No Trace of Snow was terrifyingly cold-hearted. When she analyzed his character, she felt that he was very tough and his heart was as hard as a rock. She had done so many things, but he was still very vigilant and unwavering. The favorability rose at a tortoise's speed, so slow that she suspected that No Trace of Snow was afraid of love. In the end, it passed 50 points in one night. Wei Wei Bai hid her vigilance and sat up. There was no one in the room anymore. She touched her chin and said to the system, "The increase in favorability is a little strange. Could it be that No Trace of Snow thinks that I'm going to die soon? So he pitted me and gave me some favorability?" The system said, "The data has been unlocked again. Because the favorability has passed 50 points, the data has been unlocked this time. Bai Weiwei was at a loss for a moment. He still has information hidden. The system said, I told you that this world is very difficult, and the heartbreak value has also increased. Weiwei Bai said, heartbreak value. I would have forgotten about it if you didn't mention it. This thing didn't tell me that it increased. The system said, the heartbreak value doesn't have a voice notification. If it increases, I'll tell you. Weiwei Bai said, your system world seems to be quite backward. The system said, a little more advanced than you Earthlings. Weiwei Bai stopped this backward topic. After all, this system was the best. How much is the heartbreak value? 20. Weiwei Bai was silent. How was she torturing him? Last night on the bed. Did he think that he was not brave enough, so he was tormented? Weiwei Bai said again. Where's the data? The system gave the remaining data of the male lead to Weiwei Bai. After Weiwei Bai finished reading, she deeply felt that this fucked up world was 3 times more difficult. So the pit was waiting for her here. No trace of snow, this guy was practicing the authentic virgin arts. Not only does the body have to be a child, even the soul needs a child. In other words, he couldn't get close to a woman physically, and he couldn't have a woman in his heart. Oh, not even men. In any case, he was invincible after practicing this martial art for a long time. However, there was a fatal flaw. Apart from being accompanied by poisonous flames, one's heart must be absolutely cold and heartless. Once he was moved, he would go berserk and die. There was such a sharp sword in his chest all the time. Once he showed any signs of liking her, he would vomit blood. His inner breath would become chaotic, and his inner energy would go berserk. Who would dare to be tempted? No wonder it was so hard to get good impressions. If she was the one who practiced this martial art, if she saw a man that she was attracted to, she would pick up a sword and stab him to death. Weiwei Bai silently wiped off her cold sweat. When she was farming for favorable impression points, she was constantly testing the boundaries of death. 50 favorable impression points. He did not know how many times no trace of snow had suffered. In his heart, he did not know how many times he had cursed her to die to get so many favorable impression points. Weiwei Bai sighed. I feel like I'm going to die. It's 50 favorable impression points. No trace of snow is probably thinking of ways to kill me while sighing. The system said, it's okay. Don't you still have one more chance to revive? Weiwei Bai thought about it and was happy. That's true. I can revive. The system said, no trace of snow will probably still stab you to death after one revival. In this world, it's either you die or he dies, or both of you die together. If not, why was it 3 times more difficult? It was not that it was hard to get good impressions from the male lead. It was that it cannot be done. If it was done, people would die in minutes. The S/the full articles that downloads the S. Chapter 1299. In the past, no matter how difficult the objectives were, there would never be such a terrible deadlock. In this plane, it was this deadlock that was the scariest. Weiwei Bai was silent. If no trace of snow was tempted, she would be done for, and she would not be able to farm favorability. Is there no way to solve the problem of no trace of snow? The system said, this is the difficulty of this world. After clearing this plane, you will have an easy time in the next plane. If the heart points were really full, the next plane would take a lifetime to clear. Even if the host were to just lie down and clear, the favorability would be full. Weiwei Bai face-bombed. She wanted to say something, but she stopped. She thought about this problem over and over again, frowning. Finally, she said softly, no, if that's the case, the difficulty is more than 3 times. There must be a solution. So far, this plane was more difficult than other planes. The data was hidden and would not be opened unless the conditions were met. If the heart points were not earned, the next plane would not give a lifetime to clear. And she estimated that there would not be a side reward in the next plane, because a lifetime of clearing would probably be the side reward. Then there was no trace of Snow's martial arts. The poisonous fire burned her body, and she was the antidote, so she could bear it. But this was based on the condition that she could be resurrected, so this poisonous fire could be easily solved. So there was no side reward for her. This poisonous fire was also a difficult problem. Here, it was much more difficult than any other plane's restrictions. And if no trace of Snow's martial arts was a deadlock, there was no way to solve it. Then, with these added difficulties, it would be more than 3 times. The system did not say anything. Wei Wei Bai was silent for 3 seconds. Then she said, "There is a solution." She used a definite sentence, because as long as the system did not answer, there would be a solution. The system said, "This is a difficult problem. You need to find it yourself." It said it was a difficult problem, and even if there was, it could not remind her. If it opened the back door for her too much, it would hurt itself. It would also hurt the host. So the system valued rules very much. Wei Wei Bai nodded. "That's enough." Just as he finished speaking, the system notified, "The male lead is here, wearing a mask." Wei Wei Bai's expression didn't change at all. She leaned against the window and picked up a Chinese rose. The beautiful Chinese roses looked even more brilliant in her hands. She hummed a song softly, looking exceptionally relaxed and joyful. Suddenly, a hand snatched the flower from her hand. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. She turned around and bumped into a chest. The man stretched out his hands from behind her, hugged her, did not leave, just maintained the action of suppressing her, his thin lips in her ear. His warm breath made her ears turn red. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She frowned. "What's your motive for being so shameful?" The man smiled. "What? You've really hooked up with your master? I heard that you're getting married?" Wei Wei Bai snorted. "It's none of your business. Get lost. If my master finds out, he'll skin you alive." She didn't panic at all. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were filled with arrogance. It was as if getting no trace of Snow was the happiest thing in her life. The man's smile faded. He suppressed the dull pain in his chest and reached out to gently stroke her hair. "Do you know why no trace of Snow married you?" "Wei Wei Bai. He loves me." The man, he suddenly frowned. His fingers pressed down on her long hair, and then he snorted. "The poison is hidden in your hair. You really have a good master." Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. "Are you jealous? Rotten people, ugly people, and perverted people, it's really tough to live a perverted life." The man's lips brushed past her ear unhurriedly. His voice was light and magnetic, like a poisonous snake tempting people to fall. "You're really naive and pitiful. The martial arts that your master practices is the pure Yang scripture. This martial arts contains poisonous flames that extinguish the desires of the heavens. It's his antidote. Wei Wei Bai, pure Yang scripture. This fucking name is really hard to explain." The man thought that she was frightened, and the mocking smile on his face deepened. "Why do you think he married you? It's to get your body and then transfer his poisonous flames to you. When the time comes, he'll be alive and you'll be dead." Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale. She took a deep breath. "Don't talk nonsense in front of me. I don't believe it." The man, no trace of Snow, had a deep look in his eyes. He played with a strand of her long hair, and his voice was gloomy. "Why don't you believe it? He's a hypocrite. So regret it quickly and like him. Then run away, so that he could shatter his feelings for her. Then kill her, so what? To be able to die in his hands, my life is worth it." No trace of Snow was stunned, as if he couldn't understand what she was saying. Wei Wei Bai had already turned around. Her eyes were as bright as the stars. Her red lips moved slightly. "In my life, to be able to sleep with a super powerful man like No Trace of Snow a few times, it's worth it. What's the big deal about my life? Being able to be on No Trace of Snow is the most important thing." No trace of Snow. Then he realized that he was blushing. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.